Hi, this is Susan Diol, and you are listening to the Quantum Leap Podcast.
Hello, Leapers, and welcome back to the Quantum Leap Podcast, Quantum Leap Aftershow. I'm Albie, and as always, with me is Hayden.
You can call me Sergeant Pepper, and this is my Lonely Hearts Club band.
And joining
I
us
hope you will
today,
enjoy the show.
I will. I know that part. And joining us today is Roger. You might remember him. We had him on for the, what was it, Family Style? What was the episode called about the cooking family?
That is correct.
Yeah. So welcome back, Roger.
Thank you.
Our fan might remember Roger as well from when you joined us for the episode we did on the Quantum Leap podcast about the lost footage that was found of the alternate ending. And Roger was the person who was kind enough to make it available to the public. If you don't want us saying that, we'll edit it out.
No, that's fine.
No, I don't think anyone cares by now. It's been long enough.
Roger's a real-life leaper. He changed history for the better, so that's good.
Yes.
This week, we're talking about Season 2, Episode 4, The Lonely Hearts Club, directed by MJ Bassett. She directed, Strike Back and Altered Carbon. It's written by Kristy Lowrey. She wrote 20 episodes of 12 Monkeys, so that's pretty cool. The director of photography
connection
is Anna M. Amartey. And this episode was edited by Ian Mayberry. This is his 7th Quantum Leap episode so far, editing. And the last one he did for Quantum Leap was This Took Too Long. So today we're talking about The Lonely Hearts Club. The Lonely Hearts Club, as a reminder, here's a little synopsis. Ben leaps into the body of an ambitious Hollywood assistant whose famous client, Neil Russell, played by Tim Matheson, how cool is that, is in danger. Neil's circumstances parallel Ben's relationship with Addison, and his own working relationship reaches an inflection point. Ooh, an inflection point. That sounds pretty big. In this episode, we have 2 great interviews. First interview is an interview that Matt did with costume designer Genevieve Tyrrell. And we have a great interview that Matt Dale and Fate's Wide Wheel Sam Fain did with writer Kristy Lowrey. So that's pretty cool. And that's coming up later on in the show.
All the big names.
All the big names. We're getting everybody. So that's always great. So I'd like to start out with I'd like to start out with first impressions. And I want to start with you, Roger. What was your first impression of the Lonely Hearts Club?
Well, I hate to say it, but there's an awful lot of loose threads in this episode, and I'm afraid the more that we pull on them, the more we're going to find out things that we may not really wanted to know.
Ooh, okay. Like?
Oh, I think that there's a lot going on behind the scenes with everybody, and I think that we're going to learn more about why the military wants Quantum Leap. I think we're going to find out more about Tom's role and what he's there to do. I think there may be things in this episode that point to other interests. The whole idea of who is it who's behind the information that Ziggy's giving out, and where is it going and what is it being used for. I don't think we've seen the last of a lot of things that we thought we may have seen the end of.
Yeah, that's a big mystery. Like, who is Rachel's boss? We got to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Malthus?
Maybe. Hayden, first impressions of The Lonely Hearts Club.
Look, it's a pretty good episode. It's not as good as the one we had last week, but it was pretty good. I actually don't mind all the little story threads we're getting. I do want to really pull them and unravel everything, but I guess we'll have to wait a little bit for some resolution. I was surprised we didn't see Hannah, but then again, they might have just added her to the cast and decide to use her whenever they want, just like they did with Tom, because we didn't see Tom last week either. I can tell why you were getting pissed off during our last episode, Albie. You don't like it when I get a very high accuracy on my predictions, do you?
I don't remember that part.
I think I got 100% this time.
What did Nostradamus predict Dumas predict
Nostradamus.
last time.
Nostradamus. Yeah.
Yeah. What did he
did
predict last time?
Well, I predicted first of all that the leap out was going to just be a film or a TV set. For some, I think it must just be that I watch Quantum Leap, and I can kind of tell when something seems even too outlandish for Ben or Sam to have leapt into. So I picked that. I also picked that Ian did some sort of a dodgy deal that they should not have done and could end up with some very nefarious consequences. And I have my theories about where that's going to lead as well. What else did I pick? Oh, I picked that there was going to end up being very intense confrontation between Ben and Addison, and even possibly seeing Addison not be the hologram anymore. So yeah, my accuracy is pretty high at the moment.
Yeah. You were guessing pretty right last time.
I guess I just must have the mind of a Quantum Leap writer.
Maybe.
You know, if they pay me enough, their family can have it back.
I had originally predicted that the studio behind the scenes part of the season trailer was going to be for the Egyptian episode, so I was totally way off. So not right at all on that one. I like this episode. It was good. It was like you said, not as good as the last episode. I don't think that doesn't mean it's not good, but it's kind of like I think a good palate cleanser before the next episode and after the last episode, because you wouldn't want to go crazy episode every single time. So it's good to just get the backstory and have a nice little sweet. What I was told was going to be a rom-com, but I didn't see it as a rom-com at all. I just saw it as like the portrait of a man, a very sad man. So, but I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed that Ben and Addison parts, obviously. And I think I want to talk about first the whole Ben Addison relationship. For me, I identify a lot with Ben, and I identified a lot with Tim Matheson's character, who played Neil Russell. And, I identified with a combination of both of those people. And I was glad that Ben stuck up for himself, because one thing that's very difficult is after you break up with someone, if they still want to be in your life and you don't want them to be, and they won't leave you alone. You know what I mean? So that could be a certain kind of torture. So I'm glad Ben asked for his space.
Part of that problem for me is I think that so little time has passed for Ben between being rediscovered and what's actually taken place in these leaps. He has not had time to process much of anything. For him, it's a very short period of time, whereas for Addison and everybody else back at the project, it's been those 3 years. And that compression, if you will, I think we saw a little bit at the end of the episode that Ben basically still doesn't know how to deal with it. And given the space that he needs, I don't know that he's ever going to be able to deal with it. It's an awful lot to take in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I thought it was very well acted and written, the argument that Ben and Addison did end up having towards the end, with Ben saying, if it had been the other way around, if you'd ended up lost in time, I wouldn't have given up searching. And Addison saying, I didn't give up searching either, but I had to go through the process of spending, 3 years without you. I had to go through the process of giving a eulogy at your funeral and burying you, or at least, metaphorically burying you. You can't blame me for, having to go through the grief and moving on with my life at the same time. So I thought that was very well. I thought that was just perfectly acted, perfectly written. Pretty much everything that we had discussed in the previous episode as well. All the feelings and thoughts that they would be going through together. Yeah.
But on the other hand, let's take a callback, and this episode is a callback, whether we want to admit it or not. It goes back to Al and what he went through when he came back from being MIA and found that Beth had moved on. There's a definite callback there, and I think that the story did a disservice by not admitting it, because it's very, very similar. I mean, the fact was that Beth thought that Al was still alive until she finally gave up hope and she went on with her life. And Addison has done exactly the same thing. She thought there was hope and then she finally moved on. And the fact that Ben has come back and that he's there, it was a definite change in Al's relationship with the world. And, so I have to say that there's a bit of a callback that I don't think people are going to see unless it's pointed out. That's why I'm saying it.
I think it's definitely a parallel, and it makes me think what we would think if we saw Beth when Al came back from being a prisoner of war, when he finally came back, about Beth being just angry with Al for being captured and being in a tiger cage for years, because Addison's mad at
and leaving
Ben
her
for
in the
something
first
he
place
didn't.
too.
Yeah, that's true. Leaving. I don't know if he was drafted
Addison
or
was
enlisted.
very angry.
Or,
Yeah. Addison was saying she was very angry with Ben for actually taking the leap in the first place, even if it was for her own benefit. So, yeah.
right.
And
but,
you are right about that parallel to Beth, but also there's a parallel to Donna as well. Donna has experienced the same thing. Sam left her, maybe not in the original timeline where Sam leapt, but when he changed the timeline, he still had to leap, and he did end up coming back for a few hours during the leap back, reigniting Donna's flame and her hope, and then basically abandoning her again. We don't end up knowing what happened to Donna. That's actually a good episode to parallel what's going on with Ben and Addison too, because we saw Al go through what's somewhat therapy, I guess, or something cathartic, when he had leapt and the person was in the same situation, and he had the conversation with the girlfriend of the leapee. I think Suzanne was her name, wasn't it? And she said,
Yes.
I cried my eyes out for 2 years and I still waited an extra year for you. And, that kind of helped put things in context for Al. So I think that, Ben does need his space to be able to get the context, because he just can't get past his own feelings at the moment, and which is fair enough. It's still very raw for him, and all he can think about is what he's going through. And also, it's affecting him, and I think his ability to be able to do the leaps, because we've seen how impulsive he's been acting, not just in the last episode where, he injected himself with the adrenaline and put himself in harm's way to try and get the information, but also in this episode, he refused to listen to Ziggy or Addison and just said, no, we're going to help Neil get his relationship back on track, because I guess we're seeing the one of the stages of grief again, Ben a little bit in denial, thinking that what's going on with him and Addison is savable, and thinking that what was going on between Neil and his ex, I can't remember the name, sorry, what's going on with Neil and his ex being savable as well.
It is an interesting parallel, because there were previous leaps where Sam Beckett did the same thing, where he basically had told Al, I don't agree with what Ziggy's coming up with, what it is I have to do. The best example is probably when he went back and met Donna, and helped save her relationship with her father, which changed his relationship with her later on, and actually that she actually did marry him. It's an interesting parallel, and I would hope that the writers are taking all of this into account and looking to find some kind of a
through line to connect them.
Well, a through line or some kind of resolution at some point in the future, because it is true that, all of these relationships were stressed and they all fell apart. But I think that one of the things that when you look back at Donna, when Sam leapt to save Al, is that she said that he would come back. She believed that he would come back to her. And I think it's one of the things that even that we saw in the case of Neil Russell in this case, he believed that that his ex-wife would fall in love with him and would come back to him, even if she told him it was never going to happen. Up until that point, he was absolutely convinced it was going to happen. So in that sense, when you look at all of these relationships of how they've all played, it's all about hope. It's all about that, wanting to see that somebody will come back. And the fact that, it's taken time and it's hurt, and there's a lot to go through for everybody. The drama of that should play out at some point further on, I would hope.
I wonder if GTF Dubs is putting Ben through all of, these trials on purpose. Are there things that he needs to learn and accept so that he can fulfill his life's work, as a quantum leaper, putting right what once went wrong? I like what you were saying, Roger, about how many times through the original series, Sam would just go against what Ziggy says, saying, no, my instincts are telling me it's something else. I think we're starting to see some of that come through with Ben now too. He's acting very impulsively, but also he's there. He's the one that's experiencing what they're going through. He's the one that's going to be building up this intuition, and he needs to, in many cases, follow his instincts. And I do like the fact that even at the project, when Addison's venting to Tom, and Tom says, you know what, from what I have heard and read about Ben during, his time quantum leaping, he's got pretty good instincts. Maybe you should trust that he knows what he's doing. It's kind of funny that Tom's ending up being one of Ben's biggest supporters, even though he is essentially, the rival. And, Ben is extremely, what's the word I'm looking for? Apprehensive, maybe not even apprehensive. Ben's apprehensive about Tom being there and about Tom even watching what he's going through, because Ben really got angry when he found out that Tom had been monitoring this leap and other leaps.
Understandable.
Maybe he's thinking, yeah. Well, I can see Ben thinking, well, hang on, he knows everything that's coming from me. He's going to come up with, counterpoints so that I can't. And I can't rebut him. So
it's also like an invasion of the Addison and Ben's relationship, be it a romantic or working relationship, to have her new boyfriend involved in their conversation or monitoring their conversation. So I could definitely understand that. The first part of the episode, I thought that Ben was trying to get Neil Russell back together with his ex, just so he prevents him from doing what he did on the boat or going on the boat. And, just anything different to change history so Neil Russell doesn't die. But then towards the end of the episode, when we're finding out Ben's motivation for it, Ben was really trying to get them back together. So then I saw it in a totally different light. And what do you think about Neil's story? Do you think it was actually he was ending his own life on that boat? That's how I took it. Not at first. I thought it might have been an accident, but at the end of the episode, when he really finds out that his ex isn't going to take him back, and then you heard that music play and the heartbeat sound, and then he decided he was going to go out on the boat. I think right then he decided to end his own life.
Could be. We never know. I mean, one of the things that we did hear was inconclusive, that the boat was found abandoned, and then later his body was found. I mean, an awful lot of things happen out on the ocean. It's very unforgiving. You just don't know. Stranger things have happened.
Yeah, I think it could have gone either way. It could have just as easily have been that, he's so upset that he's not paying proper attention to the conditions of the water and made some sort of a driving error, or whatever the equivalent for a boat is. So look, I don't mind that was left open-ended, because ultimately the result was the same. He ended up dead.
Mm-hmm.
So
he might have just needed to go and have his space, right?
Yeah,
that's like what Ben needs, is his space.
And I did like the fact that it was a small conclusion, that there was nothing earth shattering, that he was changing one person's future to come up with a better ending, shall we say. And it just, sometimes the little leaps were always the best ones. The big grandiose, not every leap has to save the world, I guess, is my way of thinking about it.
Yeah. And of course, the little changes that Ben does will ripple out into bigger changes. Well, if you believe that Al the bartender was GTF Dubs, we basically got confirmation of that in Mirror Image.
Well,
who else would he be?
But he laughed at the suggestion. I mean, it's one of the things, that Al the bartender, when Sam made that suggestion, you remember, it was almost a belly laugh, because he wouldn't accept that. No matter what it was written, no matter what it was intended, the way the character was portrayed, it certainly, he laughed at it.
Yeah. To answer your question, Albie, I think that Al the bartender was just a manifestation of Sam's. I think it's Sam's, not his id. The Sam we see in the episode would be the id, but it was probably either his ego or his super ego, trying to help him come to the conclusion to, counsel the id. I would have loved it in Mirror Image if Al the bartender had been played by Scott Bakula as well, and we're just seeing different bits of Sam trying to help the Sam that we see, that we're following, come to the right conclusion for the episode.
To me, Bruce McGill is definitely GTFW, and which brings up another thing. I don't know if you guys saw Fate's Wide Wheel. Sam did an interview with Romy, the writer of Close Your Encounters, and the Hannah was originally, instead of supposed to be working in a diner, was supposed to be the hotel's bartender.
Mm.
So that made me think a lot. So maybe that might be a clue to Hannah's character, because we still don't know what she's doing. IMDb said 7
maybe
episodes.
The writers are just massive alcoholics.
Maybe. IMDb said 7 episodes she's in, but she's only been in 1 so far that I know of, out of the first 4. So I don't know if the math works out on that one. So I think IMDb got that wrong.
I think maybe it's one of those things where she's credited in the cast for those 7 episodes, even if she's not going to be there for all of them. It might be one of those things that, like, all right, we don't know exactly how often we need you, but we're going to have you on the cast and pay you so that, you're there when we do need you.
I have a crazy Hannah theory, so remind me in the 3rd segment to let you know. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. I was expecting more Hannah this season from the preview. We know she's at least 1 more episode to burn a letter. So I have a theory about the letter too, because watching this episode, I had a really a thought. Like, Ben is in the past, which is Addison's past also. And all he has to do to fix his relationship is send Addison a letter by Western Union to be delivered by Joe Flaherty, right? In the rain.
Yeah.
And then everything's solved. Everything's solved. So hopefully that happens. But that might be the letter that Ben wrote that gets burnt. So who knows?
Yeah. Well, look, on the plus side, though, I've got some good news for you, Albie.
All right.
Our sponsor, Canpakes, they now deliver via Western Union. You can actually pick the day and the time and the place that you want them delivered, even if it's 100 years in the future. They will do it for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So quantumleappodcast.com/Canpakes. If you want to make sure your grandchildren will end up being able to taste these amazing pancakes. And remember, they don't go off, and the maple cubes, they are absolutely delicious and they last forever.
That's quantumleappodcast.com/Campakes. And if you go there right now, I think you still have another week or so to get into the deadline to get guaranteed shipping by Christmas. and you'll get the 33% off with subscription. And I think it's 20% off for your first order, even if you don't sign up for the subscription. But why wouldn't you, right? All right. So that's quantumleappodcast.
And that can be Christmas any year, by the way.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, because they don't go bad. They do not go bad. I don't know how they do it.
And I'm just waiting. Yeah, and I'm just waiting for them to get in touch with the Quantum Leap, the Quantum Leap Project's crew, because soon you'll be able to send them back in time too.
Hopefully we see Campaches pop up somewhere on Quantum Leap. All right, now let's go to our interview with costume designer Genevieve Tyrrell.
Hello Leapers, you are about to watch an interview with Genevieve Tyrrell, but before that I wanted to share something with you which came as a bit of a surprise to me. I ran this interview with Genevieve on a Friday evening, and the day after that I was chatting with Caitlin Bassett, not for an interview, we were just swapping some messages, and I mentioned that I'd spoken to Genevieve, and she said, "Oh, Genevieve's a saint." I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Okay, you have to find a way to put this story that I'm about to share with you in the interview." The interview had already been recorded. It was a little bit too late to do it during the recording, so I'm going to share with you what Caitlin shared with me now before the interview starts. So this is, in Caitlin's words, when we were filming the first season, my aunt died. She was like a second mother to me, and it was brutal. To get me to her funeral, I had to get written out of a few scenes in episode 109, Fellow Travellers, so I could take a red-eye to Virginia. I barely got there in time for the funeral. Well, I'd been working so much and living out of a suitcase that I didn't have a dress for the funeral. Well, Genevieve heard and said, "I got you." And the day I was about to fly out, she'd left me 5 black dresses in my trailer with shoes and jackets, so I could have something to wear for my aunt's funeral. This is it's October now. I know they were filming Fellow Travellers last October, November, so this must have been a year back, and this obviously stuck with Caitlin enough that she insisted that this goes somewhere in the interview. So during the course of the interview, you're going to see Genevieve, in her own words, explain her process, talk about leadership, how she works with her team. But it's very rare with these interviews that we get an insight into someone's person from somebody else. So I'm really pleased. Thank you, Caitlin, for sharing that with me. And now on with the interview. Hello Leapers, this is Matt at the Quantum Leap podcast, and I'm really excited today because I have with me here the costume designer for Quantum Leap. It's Genevieve Tyrrell. Genevieve, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's fun to talk about the thing that we do day in and day out now that we're hopefully post-strike.
Yeah, hopefully back soon. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about what you do, because I'll be honest, I don't know much about how costume design... I don't know anything about how costume design works, so I'm really interested to hear about the process, really interested to hear about your contribution. And a show like Quantum Leap, the costumes are probably up there with the sets as one of the main things that sell how unique this show is. So loads of cool stuff to talk about.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing that. Yeah, thank you.
I think a lot of people do. So let's start off talking about yourself before we get on to Quantum.
Okay.
You've been in the business since, I think, about 94. Can you tell me how you got started? What were some of your earliest experiences in the industry?
Sure. I was going to school to be a fashion designer, and then I moved to Los Angeles to continue studying and started working at Fred Siegel, which is was a very hipster kind of place to be in the 90s and previously, and met all kinds of stylists and costume designers, and realized after they would call me and ask me to pull things for them that I loved film and I loved the narrative word and I loved, every facet of it. I thought, why did I never think of this before? And so I changed my direction to become a costume designer. And I told basically everybody that would come through those doors that I would be an intern or a PA or whatever they needed me to be. And a number of people who did commercials and music videos took me up on it. And then everything that was low budget that they didn't want to do, I did. So I was fortunate enough to do the Counting Crows and a bunch of other musical acts that I then stayed with for a number of years.
Nice.
Yeah. And through my commercial contacts, one of them was Nicole Lalogia, who is one of the producers of Swingers. So then she brought me in to meet Jon Favreau and Doug Liman, and I designed Swingers, and then I had a movie career. So it kind of just took off from there.
And Swingers is such a cool place to start. I gather you're also in Swingers as well. I've never spotted you, but
it's so silly.
I noticed your credit.
So I know, and I'm always looking. Whenever I see that on IMDb, I have to think about it a couple times. I'm literally like, they're talking about hot girls at a party, and I walk through the frame, and that's but literally no acting was involved, and somehow I am credited for that.
Hey, more strings to your bow, and thank you for the tip, because now we can go back and find and try and spot you. So Swingers, big start. What happened next? I know we've got 20 years to cover in a few short minutes. So
all right, let me encapsulate
what happened over that time?
20 years.
Yeah.
I then became, very much the niche of dressing hip guys and creating some hierarchy of cool within, male fashion in film. And I did a number of independent films in the 90s. It was sort of, back to back to back indie films. And certainly that was the heyday for making indies. And then, that parlayed itself into making bigger budget movies and meeting different people at Disney in particular, which seems like a kind of an odd twist, but I was hired to design some movies over there, and I worked with Andy Fickman a great deal, this director who I did maybe 4 or 5 movies with, and a lot of things in between that, certainly. But I then moved exclusively into film and didn't really do that many commercials or music videos anymore. And then from film, I started adding in TV when I was doing pilots, but not doing the series. And then I did Entourage. So I did the first season of Entourage, basically the pilot in the first season. And then I left, I had a child, and then I came back with designing the movie Dukes of Hazzard, and then went back and forth between TV and film for the next however many years that has been. So, and wait, a lot of things in between there. I'm going to a thing for Freaky Friday tonight because I designed Freaky Friday. Yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah. And you're going to a thing for that tonight?
Yeah, there's a screening that a bunch of the crew has decided to all go to, and so we're all getting together, which is a first. We haven't, done that ever since making the movie. So it'll be fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine that was that film would have been a lot of fun to work on as well.
It was one of the absolute funnest movies. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis, as everyone now knows, the whole world really is quite aware of what an amazing force of nature she is.
Yes.
At the time, I was just, so, it was the first time I'd worked with her, and I was wowed beyond, and the Lindsay Lohan of it all, it was before she kind of dropped off the other side for a while. And we just had a great time making it. It was, we knew it was going to be something really special.
Speaking of something really special, that in a clunky way segues us into Quantum Leap. Can you tell me how you got involved in this relaunch? Because you've been with the new show since the start, right?
Correct. I was interviewed for it, and not the only, but one of a primary amount of things I had done prior to this show that were period was a giant pilot for ABC called Triangle that didn't get picked up. But I had so many period costumes in that. So I was able to put together boards to show the producers and so forth for the interview. And also I had done the Evel Knievel biopic that actually never got shot, but I have beautiful fitting photos. So, it was nice to take everything that had come before that hadn't been seen and present it that way. And so I met with the producers maybe 2 weeks before we started shooting, and had a very, very short time to prep it and turn around that first episode for 101. So, and then, it was kind of just off to the races because, it's every week, as you know, because you do watch our show. It's a period movie. It's an action movie. And so the process has to be intrinsic and also, just you can never just stop and just hang out and have a nice quiet afternoon. It's never going to be that show. It's always going to be, researching, and the process starts again and again, rinse, repeat.
Can you tell me a bit about that
Sure.
process, besides the fact that it's incredibly packed, I'm sure, having to do all this new work again and again? What does that look like from start to finish?
Well, fortunately, the writers are great, and we're never waiting on a script, which is a huge, huge bonus for any show, but particularly this show. So while we're still shooting the show that has been prepped, so say, 201, is on its second day of shooting, I have already read the next episode, and I'm already deep into the internet, basically. I use Shot Deck, which I highly recommend. It's created by a cinematographer, and it has tons and tons of stills from films that would not otherwise be found on the internet. So it's a very great resource. So I pull those for the costume boards that I'm creating for the upcoming episode. And then we also use occasionally, not always, there are a few other websites that have Sears catalogs from all the years, and JCPenney catalogs and things like that. So
Brilliant.
Those are a wonderful resource, and that's another online resource. There are a couple different costume houses that have amazing amounts of Life magazine and Time magazine bound together. So they truly have a library, and I've gone in there and sat there with Genius Scan and scanned, pages and pages and pages of things for any given episode. Because it's nice to see what people are wearing, not just in the photo shoots, the spreads in the magazines, but also in the ads that they're showing in the magazines, which you don't always find online. So there's that. And then what we do is, excuse me, so while I'm making the complete set of costume boards, I then pull out also the five people who are my HQ principals. Whether it's Magic, Ian, Jen, Addison, all of the rest, sometimes Tom, right? So I pull all of their costumes out and create a board of their looks too. So that goes into that equation. I also create boards for what the background will wear. So that's a lot of, additional research. So my initial boards for any given episode are maybe 20 pages. And then, we cull it down. And once I start having fittings, then those actual pieces that are chosen go onto the boards. The idea of them is swapped out for the actual look on the boards. But we also, one of the major challenges of this particular costume department is that with Ben, when he's leaping into the host, we then need to find a period vintage costume that out at a costume house or somewhere out there that is a good representation of what we would like for him to be in for the actual episode. And then we go and we try that on him so we can use it as a pattern. We source the fabrics and the trim, the buttons, the zippers, the everything. So they're period correct. The shoes, hats, whatever else, the belts, so that it's all period correct. And so then we custom make Ben and his host, and the stud
presumably different sizes. So
and the stud double, and sometimes a driving double. So we'll have maybe 5 to 7 of any given costume, multiples. So we always have to find bolts of fabric that have at least 15 yards or something like that, so that we can create this illusion that it's just a period action movie, and it's just it's amazing how it just all comes together. So that's the hugest thing. And also Ray is generally in every scene, So oftentimes we get him for like half an hour before he goes to ADR on any given day. Like that's his day off, is he goes to ADR and comes to us for fitting, his one day off. So we're very fortunate because he is such a great and generous human with his time and humor and easygoing spirit. He's really pretty wonderful.
He seems it.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, the whole cast is, I have such a fondness for each of them, and they're all so incredibly different in the show, but in real life too. So it's been a really wonderful experience.
And just to your point about, because I hadn't really considered just how many doubles of each of the costumes you must have to have. I guess something like Leap, Die, Repeat, where he's in 5-6 different hosts throughout that episode.
Yeah. That
must have been especially challenging in that respect.
Absolutely. It was actually one of my favorite episodes to design. I think I think Margarita Matthews is one of the most clever, interesting writers, and certainly anything she devises has a really interesting twist to it. And to create, 5 of the same costume for Ben and the person, the 5 different hosts in the elevator, right, was a huge challenge, but because it was in the spirit of it being such a well-crafted script and such a fun idea that, we just loved it. It was one of our favorites.
It's funny you should mention Raymond's good humor. We were interviewing Deborah Pratt a few days back, and she said to say hi. And she also said to remind you that the fans want to see Raymond suffer in heels. And that she thinks you've been very kind to him so far. I have been. I know. She wanted me to put him in some stilettos when he was the flight attendant. And it's not that I can't do, I could probably get Ray to do that for sure. However, the amount of action that's required of Ray so often would be torturous. And I just feel like, I'm just not that much of a torturer. I mean, you've watched the show enough to know that there's not many wides. We could cheat it. Just full length wide shots. But, on the plane, there were, because of the way, just the shape of an airplane to shoot in. So, but yeah, no, I guess I have been. Anytime you want to torture Ray, just know you've got Fanda behind you. We love Ray, but at the same time.
Yeah, Ray.
He's playing the leaper. He's designed to suffer. That's what Scott had to do it as well.
Right. I do have to say, too, about Ray that he is a really great leader amongst crew and cast on set. And he is always wanting to know and looking out for all of us. He's very imbued in being in a leadership role. It's, by choice. So it's a wonderful thing to watch.
Yeah, I think it's an important part of the success of the show. It shows to those of us watching closely, and it shows in the interviews that we run as well, the interplay between all the actors and the production personnel. Yeah,
I've designed shows where that was the case was the opposite. So I speak with great authority when I say it makes a big difference.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You mentioned about doing that. Obviously, the kind of the hard research on the eras, but also then choosing outfits for the project. Is there any kind of link between the two? Are you trying to reflect in some subtle way that's going over my head? What's going on in the league? What's going on in the project? How do you tie those together, if at all? Yes.
Well, what I like to do at the outset of every episode when I've done the research for the period, so I have a pretty broad overview of what the palette will be for, say 1970s. And so then I go and I look in my closets for my lead actors in the HQ project and pull out something that's completely contrary to that in both color and also tone. There are times when, with Addison being the hologram, she needs to be in the period scene, within her hologram. And so I don't want her to be wearing anything that looks like the period we're in, or also in the color scheme of the period. So it's something that has to be complementary in both the period scenes and the scenes at HQ.
Interesting. That also explains something that I think a few of us have wondered, which is in the original series, for kind of half of that reason, Al always used to be dressed in outrageous outfits so that he stuck out against whatever was going on in the period. And I think a few of us have had this question, well, why not have Addison in those kind of outrageous outfits? But of course, there's that other half she's got to fit in at the project as well.
Right. Yeah. And she's such a wonderful actress and so malleable as far as, you know, 'cause she comes from, you know, the world of the military, and she comes into a fitting and she will change into 50 things in 50 minutes. She's amazing, you know, and she looks great at everything. And it's wonderful to dress her. She's not inhibited at all about, you know, anything that I might put her in. So I mean, we could do something crazy, but you know, it's not really the tone, is it?
Yeah.
So.
Well, you got her into a Fermi suit this season, which was a lovely throwback to the original series. So we're happy with that.
Nice, yeah.
You mentioned also, and I just want to go back to it quickly, about the background. And I imagine on a quote unquote normal production, you'd spend a lot of time on the foreground artists, and then you'd be able to pull stuff out of some kind of stock or storage for the background. But when you've got, and I'm thinking of things like Fellow Travelers, where you've got dozens of extras dressed in 70s outfits, what do you do with that? How direct are you how directly involved are you in creating the look there?
Well, what we do is I have a great team that heads up the background end of this show. And part of the secret sauce of what makes this come together as quickly as it does is knowing which costume house to go to that specializes in something like 70s, like you're saying. So for example, on that episode, we had all of our fittings out at Eastern Costume. And so the primary amount of stock was pulled at Eastern, and everybody came through there. And then we shoot 2 different looks for each background and artist. And then we, upload it and create boards for them as well. So that we have, we've already established that what the color palette should be, what the look is. And hopefully, obviously during COVID times, there was a lot of attrition that people would be fit and then wouldn't show, or, so there was issues in that way. But I think we created, maybe a 20% buffer or a 30% buffer to accommodate that. But yeah, so a lot of times we're at either Eastern, United, or Warner Brothers Costumes. Those are our top 3 primary places that we, choose. We know that Warner Brothers will have like the best 80s stock, or, we know that United has the best 30s, 40s, basically 50s too. And a lot of times, strangely, at United Costume, we have United American. There have been enough big movies that have come through there and have stock there now that there can sometimes be multiples of shirts or different things that have been custom made by films past. So they're in the period section that they're appropriate for, but so we squirrel them away. When Mrs. Maisel wrapped, they sent everything to Western Costume. Western Costume bought a lot of it. And we went in and we saw 2 racks of men's shirts, and we were like, oh, we need these. We're just keeping them. We know we're going to need them, and that prevents us from having to custom make shirts. So, it's the little things that save time that we really value so much, I
can imagine on something that scale.
Yeah.
Is there anything particular that we should look out for? Is there like a particularly famous character in a famous film that, if we look closely in the background of an episode?
Oh, it's interesting.
An unintentional Easter egg, perhaps?
Oh, yeah. If I think of one in particular, oftentimes if I find something in a costume house, especially at Western, you're going to get that real rich film history. And a lot of the things that are period were custom made. And they'll have a patch sewn into the neck of the shirt or the suit jacket or something. And it says Western costume. And then it'll say the actor's initials, like R. Reagan or somebody, and it'll say the year it was made. And so you start whatever it is. I always take a picture of those little patches when I see them, because it is such a cool. I love that costume history part of it, that you just climbing up into, we call it the stacks, when you climb up the ladder into the racks of costumes. Say we call over to Angels and Berman's every once in a while, which is your local costume department, and they have an amazing stock too, but only if we can't find something, which hasn't happened too often.
Yeah, I had no idea that there was so much out there and so much rich history to pull from. Yeah, that's must make it so exciting.
It does. I mean, even you can pull medieval costumes that were custom made for something from the 40s, and you're thinking, oh, what do you think this was? And sometimes, again, going back to Shot Deck, you can, and using sort of IMDb too, to look at like what movies were made in that particular year, you can figure out what those costumes were made for originally, which is, it's fun. It's a bonus.
I'm super interested in the research part, and you mentioned at the start about looking at specific eras. I'm wondering, do you have a different process for when you're looking at specific cultures? And I'm particularly thinking of Family Style here as an example. Oh, yeah. There's some beautiful costumes in that.
Thank you.
Is there... Well, thank you for bringing it to the screen, because it made that episode come to life. And there's other examples of it peppered throughout the show, but I think that's a particularly interesting one. Do you research that in a different way, or is that the same kind of process?
That in particular, I feel like I went with, I don't feel like I researched it culturally as much until I started. This is not to my credit, but I did a bit, yes. But when some of the actors came in, some of the women in particular, they were teaching me different things about when you wear the scarves tied a certain way or on your head, or and that it spoke of both whether you were from the north or south of India, whether you were from a specific religious background, so I was learning a lot on the job as well. And, again, there's not a master class available yet online that I've seen that can teach you how to, that specific, for costuming. But, that was a lot of fun. What I felt like was the lead thing that I chose to do on that particular episode was choose colors that I felt were the colors of the spices that they were cooking with. It was
nice.
Yeah, like the paprikas and the cumins and so it's the deep paprika color and the orangey tones and the purples and all the different things that I felt were part of that like lavish feast of visuals that Deborah Pratt was set out to portray in that particular scenes and episodes. Yeah. You
make the whole process sound like it's a lot of work, but you also make it sound so smooth. I'm interested in knowing what kind of real challenges have you come across? What would you say maybe over the first 2 seasons up to where you can talk about has been your biggest sticking point?
I mean, I won't lie. We gun hard all day. We really, I have 2 shoppers that work, at least 12 hours a day, and they're out running around getting, I think that I have such a great crew that we try to infuse laughter in a lot of things. And, and I think that keeps the wheels moving in a much nicer way. And yeah, there are days when I don't, it's not that I would feel defeated, but I'm like, just amazed at that the mountain still is there to climb, Let's say that, it's just, it's big. And then it just, you can take it home with you and it just rolls over the next day. But I try to be in early with everybody and knock it out and try to have a little bit of evening left where people can be with their families and, and me too, so that we have some balance.
I feel like I'm getting a management masterclass from you now. Let's flip that. Let's flip that the other way. What's been your favorite era to visit? What's been the most fun that you've had?
I love the 30s and primarily. I love the 20s, 30s, 40s. I just find the costume, the era is so fascinating to me. And if this tells you anything about me, one of my favorite TV shows is Babylon Berlin, which is the Weimar Republic era of Germany. Okay. And it's just something that just draws me to that era with the colors and the silhouettes of costumes and the hats, the cloches, and the different accessories that seemed, somewhat flamboyant, even if there wasn't any money to be had. That people would try to have hosiery, even if they didn't really have money. So, just some of my favorite films too are set in that era.
Are there, because we're only really 20 something episodes into the whole series. Are there any eras that the show hasn't visited yet that you're hoping will come up at some point?
Oh, I also like the 60s.
Fair enough. Yeah, good. I can imagine that's a fun one to design.
Yeah, the early 60s. Yeah. I think we've covered, somewhere between, there was 1690 upcoming and 1892 in season 1. So somewhere in between there, we haven't covered any of that. And somewhere between 1892 and 1920, we haven't. So it'd be interesting to do maybe a turn of the century. It'd be the teens would be really interesting. Yeah. And not the teens of the aughts, the teens of the 19s. Yes. Right? Yeah. That'd be a lot of fun. And the costumes are so, I like using different painters as inspiration when we go back into the earlier periods. So
we talked earlier about the project side. I'm really conscious we didn't talk about Ian, and Ian has some fabulous outfits. Is that do you work with Mason particularly on that look?
Absolutely. We have epic fittings. Truly 2 hours go by and we're laughing and chatting and playing music. And I feel like we've had a wonderful evolution since the first time we met. Mm-hmm. And it has definitely shifted and evolved. And I find that somewhere between Ian and Jen, my muse resides. If I could dress myself like either of them, I see the way I'd want to dress in both of them is what I'm trying to say. So a lot of times, I can put things on Mason that like they're my paper doll. And it just, oh, wow, that looks amazing. I love mixing, there's a lot of patterns. There's a lot of color. There's a lot of bold choices. There's, funky shoes. There's really fun jewelry. So it's always an ongoing process. And certainly when I dressed Alice Kremmelberg too, when she plays Rachel, we did do a thing that was how Rachel was part and parcel so that they had some connectivity in what they would wear. So that was a lot of fun. And Jen, Nanrisa looks beautiful in just about anything. She's another one where I can put her in oversized blazers and belt them and wear mini dresses and over the knee boots and things that are funky and real street style is her vibe. So she's always fun. And certainly the 2018 flashbacks in episode 201.
Oh my God, how have we not even talked about that? Yes, those flashbacks were so much fun for Jen and Ian particularly.
Yeah, we made that knockoff of, well, we got it cleared, of course, but the Tribe Called Quest Low End Theory t-shirt and, things like that spoke to her heart and my heart. She was in love. She was like, may I please have one of these? So that doesn't happen every day.
No. And you mentioned that evolution. I've noticed Magic's outfits. His early on the first few episodes he was in, it was very much slightly different color of the same suit week after week, but he seems to have been going through a bit of a change over time as well.
Yeah, well, we definitely for season 2 we've given him more casual elements. He was much more of a suit guy and a blazer guy in season 1, and we really wanted to convey that he went away and came back and is having that relationship and involved in a relationship, and just has he every time he's on screen, you see the warmth of a father figure. And I feel like some of these knits that we have him in are, really convey that warmth even more. Now you're making me rethink what I'm putting him in 209.
Oh, interesting. Absolutely nothing wrong with the suits, but I think it really does. It sells the 3 years have passed.
Yeah.
You can see he's a slightly different person from the costume, and with the other actors, sometimes it's a bit more about the portrayal and the writing. But with Magic, you can definitely you can see it when he steps on screen.
Yeah, thank you. We tried to give everybody a bit of a twist, but not something. Not something that was too character altering.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 3 years.
Correct.
And speaking of 3 years, this has been such a good conversation. I feel like I could carry on talking to you for 3 years. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. Genevieve, I hope I can invite you back on the show at some later point, maybe when the series comes to an end, which hopefully is many years from now. And we've got a lot more to look back on, a lot more to unpack, because I think there's so much more we could talk about. But for now, I'm really conscious of your time, and I think you've been very generous sharing so much about your process. I've learned a lot. I know the listeners will have done as well. So just wanted to say a great big thank you. And we really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you from myself and also the Costume Design Guild. Anytime we're asked to talk about our craft and our love of it and explain the process, we are happy to. So thank you for shining a light on it.
And we're back. One thing I would have asked her if I was there, I couldn't make it that day. I think I was having a bad day. I have good days and bad days. But I would have asked her, how many leather jackets does Addison have? Because it's got to be like 40, right? I don't know. She looks good in all of them, but that's a lot of leather jackets.
One for every day of the year.
Oh, there you go. Isn't that a song? I don't know. What do you think about the costume design, Roger, in this incarnation of Quantum Leap and maybe the last one?
Well, I mean, I got to say, this episode, the tuxedo that Neil Russell had was definitely a callback to Al's tuxedo in Genesis. It was, I mean, the only thing we were missing was the scarf, but the tie was right there. It was a classic. So yeah, definitely a good callback. Speaking of leather jackets, I mean, Al had some classic leather jackets. The one with the stop signs was always my favorite, but
mine too.
I don't know. Will we ever see Addison in that jacket? That'd be a hoot.
Well, people are selling replicas of them. I've been keen to get one, but I just got to slim down enough to be able to fit into it. I think Alison has one, doesn't she?
Yeah, I want to see Addison. She does have that one. I want to see Addison in a silver leather jacket at least once.
Fashion, yeah, and the other one, of course, is I'm glad to see the editing is picking up. It's one of the things that I always liked about the original show. Very much a fan of how well edited it was. I mean, Elite for Lisa was my favorite edited episode out of the old series. I'm definitely seeing some good things to keep us going in this series with editing. So it's definitely,
and it's getting better as time goes on too. I think.
Yep,
they're really getting the balance right and the synergy between the project and the leap right.
Yeah, this editor was Ian Mayberry, so this was his 7th Quantum Leap so far. So definitely knowing what he's doing. So that's good.
Yeah. But speaking of the project, we haven't really talked much about that yet. So we've got some interesting stuff going on there now. And I think another thing that I predicted that I'm also 100% accurate on, we're getting more military and government interference, because what's going on as soon as Tom's gone and saved the project. Oh, he's got to do a massive audit of everything and make sure everything's on, the way it's supposed to be, at least bureaucratically, and trying his hardest to make sure it never gets shut down again. But I mean, he's probably high up enough so that he has the authority to never shut it down again anyway. So I don't know. I think he's wanting to take over, and I guess we'll see what happens. I did like, was it Tom in the episode who said at the end with Magic, maybe sacrifice is what Quantum Leap is all about. We've had two people leap, two people that we haven't been able to get back, and maybe we're just not able to do it. Maybe, taking the choice to Quantum Leap is sacrifice, and we might just have to accept that. So, the first series was building up to, we're getting Ben back. We're going to get him back. We're going to get him back. This season, it kind of seems like they're getting to the acceptance that maybe that's not going to be the case. So, I mean, there's always a chance, but, it's interesting seeing how their minds are
kind of
changing.
a cop-out, actually. I think it's taking the easy way out. I think the whole goal is to try and bring him home. I mean, that was one of the things about Sam, it was always they were trying to bring him home. There was all kinds of things. I mean, we get down to the whole bit about Sammy Joe Fuller working on the project and allegedly working on things to try and bring Sam back. I would think that part of the idea of, I think it was Magic who made the reference to No Man Left Behind. I think that still has to be a goal for the project, is to try and bring Ben home. Acknowledging the fact that it may be difficult, it may not be something that happens, but I think that we still want to bring him home. I think that's a definite challenge.
I saw that the first time when Tom was talking about sacrifice, I saw that as a good thing. Like, maybe we did get this wrong for 30 years. Maybe that's just part of the process. But upon repeated viewings, I was thinking maybe subconsciously Tom is hoping that Ben doesn't come home so he doesn't have real competition for Addison.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that, but yeah, that's a very good point.
The other one I'd like to figure out is, which branch of the military is Tom with? It's come from the Pentagon and from the Department of Defense, but, is he with the Army? Is he with the Air Force? Is he with the Navy? Because there would be a specific branch, even with a Black Ops project. Who is he actually going to be reporting to? So it's a question of, are they all involved? It just seems that it'd be a specific. Is the Space Force involved? For all we know, it's a question.
Great show, by the way.
Yeah. It just comes down to, I don't see it as a blanket from the DoD. I see it more of, there's a specific branch which is going to be involved with Quantum Leap. And, previously we had seen Al and the Navy or the Marines. It's a question to me of which branch of the military really is going to be after it, because we know even in today's world that there is inter-service rivalries. And I'd have to think that it has to play out at some point in Quantum Leap.
Yeah. Well, look, Al was Navy. Magic was Army, I think.
No.
Wasn't he?
Magic was part of a SEAL squad. Navy SEALs. No.
Oh, yeah, you are right. Yep. No, thank you.
SEALs. Yeah.
So there's definite naval influence from Magic at the very least, and probably Tom Beckett somewhere. If Tom's still alive.
And you just raised another point, which is definitely somebody who I would not put that past. That had been the phone call that who Magic made to, because Tom Beckett was his squad leader. If there's anybody that that you're going to have some kind of a connection with, it's going to be with those people he was with in Vietnam. And I would hope that at some point Tom Beckett will get involved in this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and he's still
I'm sure
around.
David Newsom, and I'm sure David Newsom would jump at the chance to do it. He always I think when we interviewed him, he was definitely very keen on reprising the role if and when the opportunity arose. So yeah, it would be great to see. I actually thought that Magic had just called his current wife because it did seem very lovey-dovey in his tone when he was, confiding in that person, and that's the kind of thing that I would expect. That would be
Well,
the sort of person that I would expect that you'd
the other
call
one
if you
is
were going through hard times. But it could have easily been
I
just a very
suspect
good
that
friend.
Magic may have had something to do with where Janice ended up, and I wouldn't write her out of the picture either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hopefully we find out who Magic is talking about. And in fact, if that anniversary is an anniversary with someone that he's in a relationship with or something. So that'd be interesting to find out. I think when it comes to time travel, it would be under the government agency that we don't even know about. That's my personal opinion. Like, what's that saying? The Pentagon's really a hexagon or a octagon or something like that. Yeah. So, other things that happened back at the project, the little bit between Ian and Jen about this processor sending out information every time Ben leaps. I was thinking to myself, firewall, what are you doing? I mean, how is it sending out information? Yeah, I know it's a quantum computer, but it's still a computer. There's got to be some way to block it. And then Jen was like, what about a firewall? And they were talking about firewalls. Yes, that's like step one, right? I don't understand. And how could that use that much more energy just to send some information? I don't know. A lot of it seemed like they don't have like a computer expert on staff
I think that
help them.
actually can be explained, Albie. I would think that you would need more processing power to handle finding Ben when the leaps haven't been pre-programmed like they were in season 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand them needing faster and more powerful chip. I can totally understand why Ian would go and do it if they thought that that was the only option to be able to, get back in touch with Ben. So I don't blame Ian for doing what they had to do.
Oh, no, yeah.
But it does make me wonder, who is Rachel's boss? It was cool that we found out they were still together, or at least had gotten back together in this missing 3 years. But, I guess that relationship is on the rocks now too. It seems like everyone's relationship's going to be on the rocks this season. It must just be the season of breakups. But
on the rocks, you're neat. You don't know.
The other one that I'm has to do with our favorite parallel hybrid computer. I give Ziggy a lot more credit with having AI involved, and Ziggy was a lot more adaptive in the past, and I would have to think that Ziggy has to know a little bit more than he or she, depending on your choice of
pronoun,
which or they are telling. And because in the past, Ziggy was a lot more involved and a lot more user-friendly, I guess is a better term I'd like to use. So the new updated version of Ziggy, again, I still can't wait for the moment when we get to hear Ziggy talk. It just, to me, it's inevitable. And I think at some point, Ziggy basically has to throw the brakes on and set the train in the right direction. And then that would be good by me. I think it'd be good by a lot of people.
Yeah,
I think we'll get it eventually.
Sorry, Albie. I think I might have just heard the doorbell. Come in. Oh, look who's here. It's Nostradamus. Yeah, I think he's got some more predictions for us.
Go for it.
Well, what I think might end up happening is the thing that jumped out at me is, who is Rachel's boss? Why have they programmed this chip to hack into Ziggy and to take as much information as they can? Well, we do know that somewhere back in time there are other leapers from other projects which are essentially built the sort of same way and work the same way that Sam's project initially did, I have a feeling that this hack might end up being the start of that evil leaping project. We may end up seeing Zoe and Thames and Lothos. Maybe the time that we hear Ziggy actually talking is when that AI is combined with all the information that they get, and we get to hear evil Ziggy, who I guess we find out will end up being Lothos. So I think we may end up seeing the start of the evil project, and I'll be very keen to see what they end up doing with it. If maybe that's the reason why Ben had to keep leaping. Maybe GTF Dubs knew that the Quantum Leap project was never really going to stop looking for Ben, and so realized, okay, the evil project is going to end up coming into being. So we need another leaper out there who can, counteract all the evil things that they're going to do. And as I said, we keep getting this theme throughout a lot of the episodes of you can't trust your government. I have a feeling that there's, going to be governments from other countries or just very, very rich corporations who, want to make use of this, brilliant new technology and most powerful weapon known to existence, time travel. I think we're going to end up seeing some really great stories and conflict from this little thread that we're getting. So, what do you think might end up happening from that little story thread, Roger?
I'd like to think it's possible, but in a certain way, I'd rather see rather than Lothos, I'd rather see it be some other new, different threat. Because one of the things that I've always believed is that Quantum Leap is not linear. Quantum Leap does not that every leap creates a new branch of the multiverse. And I know that doesn't sit well with some people. I've gotten a fair number of people who have called me and said they don't like the multiverse concept. But when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense for Quantum Leap because it's setting things that once went wrong. And every time you change things, you create in my way of thinking, you create a different reality. It's the turn right instead of turn left or whatever, but it's a different way that things go. And so to me, the whole multiverse concept leads you to having infinite possibilities. And while I wouldn't put it past the writers to do a callback to Lothos, I'd almost like to see a new threat. There are all kinds of things. We did have the whole thing in the last episode with the Starlight Project, which is very close to the name of the Starbright Project, where Sam met Al abusing a vending machine. It's entirely possible, but I'd rather see a new and different threat than an old throwback.
Yeah, I tend to find the multiverse theory a little bit sad. Not that it's a bad theory or anything, but it just means that we've shifted to this other what's the word we use? This
timeline?
Other reality, this other timeline. But that would also mean that those other original timelines where all the bad things still happened still happen. They still exist. It's just we've been shifted to the other one. I'm thinking of things like Rick and Morty, where that Rick and Morty ruin all these other universes, and they just go in their portal, go to another one, and have to realize that they've destroyed multiple people's lives in many, many different incarnations of the same universe.
Part of my thinking, though, goes back to the episode Lee Harvey Oswald, where at the end of it, where Al tells Sam that in the previous history that Jackie had been killed. Well, how did Al know that? How did he know that there was a change? So what had happened, what history had occurred previously, and what history had gone forth after the change that Sam had made in saving Jackie's life. To me, the fact that Al recognized that in an original history, this is what happened, and now this is the history going forward from that point. Where do you find that, to me, you can't just say, well, this change was made and then go forward. You have to have, well, it's a divergence to me. And that's why the multiverse theory.
I think I see what you're saying. You're saying that, if everything had changed around Al, then there shouldn't be any memory of any timeline where Jackie had died. And the fact that, Al does have access to this information and possibly even remembers it must mean it must have existed somewhere. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but I would prefer it if it meant that when things were changed for the better, that that previous reality does somehow cease to exist, because you'd hate to think of all that extra suffering still happening. So I don't mind the multiverse theory, but I would prefer it if it was, there's a different timeline, but that other timeline is now going to fade and cease to exist because, things have been made better. That's just how I would prefer to see it.
Roger, that's my favorite ending to any television episode ever, is when we find out that in the original history, Jackie was killed as well. So I really love that one. I definitely believe multiple timelines exist in the Quantum Leap universe, because we have a timeline where Beth didn't wait, got remarried, and there were no daughters. And then we're in this timeline where she did wait because Sam intervened, and Al and Beth got back together and had many daughters. So we wouldn't have Janice if it wasn't for Sam deciding to change history. So instead of changing the timeline, we're just going along with them, two different timelines. That's how I look at it.
Exactly. And I like to think that one of the possibilities, getting back to the project, is that there could be timelines where Sam Beckett's first leap was successful and he leaped back. He leaped back to the project, and that could actually be something that we might see at some point with Ben. He could leap back to the project again, the same thing, but he may have something overriding that he has to leap out again. It's it's always possible. And with the multiverse, again, the whole concept of anything is possible. That's why it. Why not have a story where Ben leaps back and find out that he never left at all, or that Addison never left, that nobody ever left.
You're reminding me of something funny I've been watching lately. There's a new season of Beavis and Butthead that's just been released, and when I say just been released, I mean recently enough so that I've only just found it. It's probably been around a few years, but
I think a few months.
Yeah, but they've got these segments where alien versions of Beavis and Butthead introduce the next segment, and they're saying, you feeble earthlings are not going to understand what you're seeing. We're seeing Beavis and Butthead from multiple universes, but hopefully you'll at least find it funny. And then they'll go into a segment where they're in their 40s or something. Yeah, a completely different sort of situation for them to be in, and a different incarnation of them. And it is very funny, but you're just making me think we're going to need a futuristic version of Sam Beckett to introduce all these extra timelines that we might see an episode from somewhere down the track.
I absolutely love that they're keeping the old series alive. They did have Susan Deal on in season 1. Talking about, so they had Beth back, but they're also mentioning Sam's wife. They're mentioning Sam. They're mentioning Al pretty often, more often than I thought they would. So it's cool that they keep just name checking them. And I think that's a really good thing, because, it makes us smile and makes us hopeful for, revisiting old storylines or seeing those storylines continued. But I think they're doing a lot new too. So I think they're going to make you proud, Roger.
Well, I think that they wouldn't keep bringing up all these old elements from the original series if they're not going to, materialize into something further down the track. They might have something in mind for Sam, but they just have to make it so that it's at the right time and is agreeable to what Scott Bakula thinks, is deserving of the character of Sam Beckett and, his own, time and effort to put in. I don't blame Scott Bakula for turning down the offer of making a little cameo in the first episode of the new incarnation, because all it was going to be was a tiny little couple seconds of a viewing of him, not even any dialogue, just to show that he was involved in helping Ben and Janice, get Quantum Leap going again and get Ben into the past. So
We got to remember that cameo was the end of the first episode. So that was just a teaser into what's coming next. And he could have played a huge role in that season if that had worked out. So they didn't just want him to do that. That was just a holy crap. The pilot ended like this. We're coming back next week to see what's up with Sam. But I think they're keeping Sam and Al and Beth and, Janice, everybody, the Calavicis alive in this universe. So people are aware of it. So if they actually do an episode with Sam or a story arc with Sam in it, that people aren't like, what is this? What are they talking about out of left field? They mentioned it in the first episode with a little bit of holograms of Al and Sam and different things, and they keep mentioning it. So like when it comes up, people have either gone back and watched the original series that might not have, or at least they're aware in the universe that they existed in the previous project.
One of the things that I've heard from time to time, which actually would be a great way to not bring them both back, would be to have Ben leap in to a leap where Sam is there, which would be an interesting, the whole idea of multiple leapers at multiple times, could definitely be an interesting point somewhere in the future.
Yeah, Back to the Future too. Now that
Scott is off to Broadway, hopefully won't be anytime soon. But that a lot of people have mentioned that as a possibility, and I agree. That would make for some interesting drama.
Trouble is, you'd have to rely very heavily on stock footage, make it more like a clip show, and hope that you can recreating the sets and the costumes wouldn't be too bad, but you've also got to try and recreate, the actors being in
not necessarily
the forms that they were back then 30 years ago. So
one of the things we could go on to, though, is to basically have Sam on a new leap and to have Ben leap in at the same time, and they could be there for the same purpose, or they could be there at cross purposes.
Do you mean like a leap that Sam's currently on? I thought you meant like a previous leap of Sam's.
Could be a previous leap, but I think a new leap would be interesting, because obviously we won't be able to have Dean, but a leap where there's no holograms to help, and the fact that they may have to work together.
I think if we do see Sam ever again, it would be at Scott Bakula's current age, because
yes,
that would just be the budget friendly, and I think right thing to do. And I think eventually, who knows, season 3, season 5. Who knows? But that Spider-Man moment when all 3 Spider-Mans men teamed up to save the day. Yeah, they can do that. They have Scott Bakula. They have Raymond Lee, and that would be amazing. So, okay, so like in the next segment after this interview we have coming up, I want to talk about the little things in the episodes, the episode that I liked and you thought was cute or thought was interesting. And I want to talk about those things, and I want to talk about my theory about Hannah. Hopefully we see Hannah again. I think she's more in the previews than the episodes. But Matt Dale and Sam from Fate's Wide Wheel, if you haven't checked out their video this season, they're really good, and you should check them out. There's an interview with the writer from last week's episode, like I mentioned, and they got together for both podcasts, and they interviewed the writer of this episode, Kristy Lowrey. So that's coming up. But Hayden, don't we got some bills to pay first?
Yeah, well, Can Pakes, as always, is sponsoring us, and they just want everybody to know that they've got a whole bunch of new flavors. But if you want to try them, you've got to really want them. So they're doing a whole bunch of mystery boxes. Some of them might end up being really delicious. Some of them might end up being really disgusting. It is the gamble that you have to take, but you got to be in it to win it.
And it all depends on your preferences. Because I got Brussels sprout with butter and salt flavored Campakes, which was amazing. They had butter cubes instead of maple cubes because I guess maple wouldn't go good on Brussels sprouts, but I love Brussels sprouts, so it worked out for me.
Yeah, I got some that were chili flavored, and I absolutely love hot food, even though, I end up paying for it, not long after when I'm, sitting on the throne. So, you can have some really interesting flavor combinations there. I'm very, very keen to get some more, and I hope you all are too. So quantumleappodcast.com/canpakes. Get onto the mystery box.
So let's go to this interview now that Matt and Sam did with Kristy.
Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel. I am your host, Sam, and this week we have something very special, a collaboration, and I get to introduce my co-host for the episode.
Yes, it's Matt Dale from the Quantum Leap podcast, and Sam and I have with us Kristy Lowrey, the new supervising producer on Quantum Leap and writer of tonight's episode, The Lonely Hearts Club. Kristy, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
We're
really excited to have you.
Yeah, this should be a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the episode. I thought that there were some incredible moments, for the characters, and I really enjoyed the way that the leap paired up with a lot of the character development. And it was done in a very unique way because the leap itself might not have been that action-packed, hyper dramatic leap that we're used to. And I think it was incredibly successful the way that it was, though. And there are lots of questions, I'm sure that Matt and I have. But one of the first things that I will throw out there is that this episode has an excellent guest star in Tim Matheson. Tim is just phenomenal. Now, obviously, I know when breaking the episodes and writing the episodes, you don't often know who's going to be cast in the show. So I'm curious, was there any inkling that Tim would be your Neil Russell? And if not, at any point, did you maybe tailor anything towards him, or were things written in a certain way? Because obviously he's someone who has a lot of experience, carries a lot with him. So I was curious as to what the process is when you have a guest cast member like this.
No, we did not know we would be getting Tim. I think early on we knew we wanted to get someone, a name, because it is such, I think, a good character role for anyone to step into. I'm sure I'm allowed to say this, but early on we were kind of like, our prototype was like Ted Danson was like the name we threw. I think even for a while we called the character Ted. I think we tried, I'm sure we went down that road, which is far above my pay grade, but whenever, I think we were slightly into prep, but like I had heard Tim, which I think we were all very excited for, Animal House. Obviously Tim has been doing this for a very long time, great resume. And I will just say, working with him on set, he is just like a lovely human being. And as long as he's been doing this, was just like excited. Like it felt like it was like his first like thing he ever did, which is like just cool for, I think, not only me, but all the actors to like, oh, here's this guy who's been doing this so long and he's still just as like excited to be acting. So Tim ended up being very lovely, such a great actor, such a great human being. So I can't see anyone else playing that Neil role now. So I'm glad that's who we got.
Tim really lights up the screen with a lot of what in some people's hands could be almost cheesy OTT rom-com dialogue. It's very big, broad strokes.
Yeah.
I'm really interested, going back a step before the casting, what kind of inspiration you had. Was this always designed to be for me, going into the Christmas season as we are, this feels like the season for rom-coms. And was this the kind of what you were going up against, trying to fit into the Hallmark movie style?
Yeah, I think early on, and I admittedly have not seen this movie, but I know Dean threw around my favorite year, or when we were just talking about conceptually, and even like, and this is not necessarily tonally like get him to the Greek, but like you have to like your character has to get someone who is of prominence to like who's obviously not listening to you to like get them to a place was kind of like early on where it started, and then I think just naturally. Yeah, because we even called it a rom-com. I think at very times when we were shooting it, everyone felt that very much, which, yeah, I guess looking back at other episodes, we don't comedy, of course, but usually it's like action and this and that. And this is kind of felt, I think we even leaned into those moments sometimes and even those tropes of like rom-com moments. So I think pretty early on, we knew like it was going to be a little bit lighter tone and lean into just like the romance of getting the woman you love back and the comedy of that. And then, of course, the fact that this character was, used to be a sitcom actor, was in the comedy world. Like, it felt like you had to, like, lean into, like, that charm and just, like, being funny and that kind of thing. So I think we talked around that. We kind of knew we were swimming in those waters pretty early on.
Yeah, it's, and one of the things that I think works so well is that there's a wonderful balance. And I find this quite often, frankly, with the Quantum Leap revival and in the classic series as well, is there's such a wonderful balance between, the dramatic moments and these incredibly grounded, or excuse me, these incredibly, you've got the balance between the grounded moments and some of these incredibly over the top moments, or what could be over the top, and it works so well. And I'm curious, when you're approaching an episode, from a writer's perspective, how do you do that? How do you kind of balance the honesty with some of that sort of a little bit more oddball comedy as well?
Obviously we do things like tonal passes, and as far as like the writers, I think. And I'm coming in new to the show, but everyone has been there since season 1. Like, we kind of know what is, like, this is either a bridge too far in either, like, in any genre we do, like, oh, we're not this scary, or we're not this, like, we don't kill people. So we all kind of know, like, what that line is. And I think for this specific episode, what's great about it is, like, we have, like, the character arc, and specifically, Ben's character, but also in this Neil, who Tim's playing, just a, where their arc starts out. So it kind of starts out, if you notice the episode is very light, like you are in a rom-com, but as you get further into the episode, it starts to get heavier and more emotional. And by the end, there are tears and there are like moments where you're like, I'm sure we'll get into that, like, breakups and this can happen. So it kind of helped, that kind of helped guide us, like, where is Ben at emotionally in the episode, and also where is Neil at in terms of like the wedding and all that. So I think that kind of gave us a guiding light to follow. Like, we started out light and then definitely got into like heavier, almost drama territory by the end, which was very helpful to just keep us in the right direction.
I'd like to understand, because I know a lot of our listeners like to understand the process of what happens behind the scenes. You mentioned a tonal pass. Was that what does that really mean in terms of what does that look like?
Yeah, I won't say we always do them with every episode, but I think sometimes when we're breaking in the room, even when we pitch ideas, sometimes someone will pitch something that's a great idea, but we always have to question again. Is that our show? Is that for our audience? Is that something we can even do on NBC? Because we can say we want to do, a scary episode or something that is like thrilling and action, but we're not going to go into like rated R territory, or we're not going, again, headshots and cussing and like hard R stuff. So you just know, like, you can pitch something that is like of that, and then you have to be realistic about what your show does best, who your actors are, what you're even allowed to do, and then just kind of pull back or amp it up, up to the edge of the line of what you're allowed to do. So when I say tonal passage, again, if someone pitches like, and then someone comes in with a gun and kills everybody, I'd be like, okay, now what's the quantum leap version of that? What does Ben do that's smart, and he can do a clever thing, because that's our show. So I guess when I say tonal passage, I mean, everyone is pretty good about checking our pitches up front. And then when it lays out on the page, like, okay, that feels arch for the villain to do, or this is a little too rom-com-y for this moment, or it gets a little silly and broad. I think we just are always kind of keeping that mindful for like what its strengths are.
I mean, I love hearing about that, and it's fascinating to me the way that the room in particular interacts and collaborates on the episodes. One of the things that's interesting, and Matt and I were talking about this beforehand, because we're both intrigued by this, is that even though we're aware that most of this takes place, most of the writers' room is virtual over Zoom, that a lot of the writers, in fact, I think all of them, with one exception, are in the LA area, and that exception is you're in Arkansas. So we're curious, how does that work?
Well, I will say I lived in LA for 10 years. I'm originally from Arkansas, but I did live in LA for the previous 10 years, writing and being in person in a room. And then, the pandemic has kind of changed, obviously not only our industry, but, the world in some sense. And so, that allowed me, I moved back home a year ago. So I will say, and I'm maybe down the road, you guys will get to talk to her. We do have another writer who is long distance and even longer distance than I, 'cause she's in Europe. She's from the LA area, but currently is in Europe. So I guess luckily I'm not the only one, but so I don't know. I mean, I've done virtual rooms. Again, we've all been in LA and in a virtual room because of the pandemic. So for me, it's like there's a time difference, but I feel like I was like, we might as well all be in LA, I guess, kind of thing. So there's really, I guess, no difference for me. But what is great about what I like about the virtual room, obviously, is it allows you to get writers who are not necessarily based in LA, because people, New York, Europe, everywhere. It kind of just opens up, especially a show like Quantum Leap, where you're doing different time periods, different areas, like to be able to get a writer from, the South, the East Coast, another country. Like, I think that opens you up to just diversity in your room that is different than what you typically think of when you think of diversity.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And your experience too, speaking of your past, like, this isn't your first time travel show either, because you worked on 12 Monkeys.
You've done your research. Yes, I did. 12 Monkeys was my very first, I was a staff writer. It was my very first show. I did season 3 and 4 there. Have you guys watched 12 Monkeys? I'm curious.
A little bit. I honestly, I watched a little bit of the first season, but I've not seen the rest.
And this is not a 12 Monkey show, but I highly recommend anyone who is into time travel, because to me, what's different about 12 Monkeys is serialized time travel. So if you like to wind yourself in literal knots and circles and time loops, it gets pretty crazy what we are doing there. But yeah, this is, I was kind of excited to return to time travel, because it just allows you to do, like, who doesn't love to jump to a different time period and do a different thing. So I was very excited to return to that sandbox, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So that really interests me then. So you like the opportunity to jump to different time periods. So for you, was the first thought rom-com, or was the first thought turn of the century, turn of the millennium LA? What was the driver behind this episode?
I think I'm trying to think back to early conversations. Again, the first thing that pops out in my mind is Dean saying my favorite year. So again, if I don't know where that was coming from. I feel like we were thinking, we knew that we wanted to do, in terms of Ben and Addison, like their relationship story, something big here. And so I don't know that we were thinking rom-com, but I feel like the rom-com, like the year wasn't a huge thing. Like I think we went 2000 just because thinking about like, just like there's big stars now, but you had like, that felt like a time where you had like giant, mega, like iconic stars. So I just feel like 2000, we could do something somewhat recent, but also still 20 years ago. But it was like of a time of era when we were looking at pictures of like Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, and like just the things they would wear. It just felt very like, you could look at that time period and go, oh, that was late 90s, early 2000s. Like it's pretty, identifiable. So I felt like we were rom-com or in that tone first. And then, I think we just picked the year 2000, just like it felt like a good even number. So, but I don't think we were ever thinking like an 80s, 90s or even, more modern version that I can recall.
Yeah, sorry, I notice I keep saying rom-com and you keep seeming to try and divert away from that. So I guess you don't feel this is as rom-comish as I mean it as a compliment. I love a good rom-com.
No. I think part of that is if you would have told me 6 months long enough, well, we've had the strike. If you had told me a year ago I'd be writing any kind of rom-com episode, I probably would have laughed in your face. So when I think about, did I write a rom-com? Did I? I don't know. I'm like, I guess I did. So for me, it's just more like typically not my first go-to in terms of what I do, but like I had a blast writing it. So yeah, I mean, it is a rom-com, right? I guess that's probably just my own bias of like, the term maybe. So
it has all the classic beats and this sort of big plot of this guy making a grand romantic gesture, and then towards the end there's tears. So yeah,
sure.
to me that's a rom-com.
That's fair.
The lovely thing though is that like it definitely does not play too much into the convention, because if it did, like Neil would get the girl and and Ben and Addison would, and instead like it does the exact opposite. And it's lovely, with the end with Neil going to his daughter. But before we get there, one of the things that I was thinking about is like just for a little further context for listeners if they're not familiar, my favorite year was a movie from the 80s with Peter O'Toole where he played this sort of aging, swashbuckling film star from the 30s and 40s, and this comedy writer gets to basically spend a week with him in order to try to get him to this comedy cavalcade of stars TV show that they're doing. And so I can see the parallels there and with Ben's journey with Neil. But one of the things that I really enjoy too about the nature of the story and just the nature of the time travel aspect is that there's these wonderful nods to the period, including I love right off the bat after we kind of get the fake out with the leap in where we think we're in some sort of, crazy heist is about to happen. We get this nice little nod to Quentin Tarantino where Neil makes the line about Quentin, and at that particular point in time, as you said, like that was one of the things that Quentin Tarantino was kind of known for, was bringing some of these actors back, like a John Travolta or Robert Forster, or, and I think that it really plays well into that as aspect of the time period. Was there anything else about the time period that you felt was really interesting to explore? Because you don't necessarily get to do a lot of that over the course of the episode, but there are these little conventions, like even like the Tonight Show, for instance, that I feel like at that time, were so much more integral to the time period than they are, say, today, or even maybe, 20, 30 years prior.
I don't know if there's anything necessarily in terms of like what is it about 2000. I think, again, now everything's so like digital and you can watch like TV and movies on, your phone, your computer, there's influencers, all that. But like that was of a time where like, again, the big names of, Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, because we even talked about, it's like, imagine being with Tom Cruise the day before he died. Like that's kind of sometimes how we would like imagine the magnitude of like something like that. So I think part of it is just like of a time in which like stars were so big, Hollywood had this kind of like beam about it in a way. Probably now people I think look at Hollywood sometimes and they're like, Hollywood. But like then it was like, a shining beacon of like hope and this and that, and just trying to remember that time. And of course, like, we had fun little, like even picking out wardrobe, like the Planet Hollywood hat. Is Planet Hollywood even still a thing? And small things like that. And you're like, oh, even 20 years, things have like disappeared and went away. So, I will say this is, I think still to date, the new like episode doing 2000 is, I guess, the most modern thing we've done this season. So there isn't, I guess, visually some of the most like, you're in the 80s, 70s, 50s, 40s. It doesn't quite have that, but I think, it is of a time where we like, I'm imagining most of our viewers, like you remember the year 2000, you remember what it was like. You've been there. You're like, oh yeah, I've seen that wardrobe. So I feel like it's weirdly nostalgic because you lived through that. And like in the 40s, like I wasn't around. It's cool to see that stuff, but like I couldn't tell you what that felt like, but you can tell someone like what the 2000s felt like, which I think is kind of cool. And I will say what kind of helped us in thinking of like the big stars. I think what's a little bit different about this episode, usually Ben is kind of like when he has his host and he has, the person he's trying to help, he's usually leading that in an active way. And it's like, well, who's the type of person that he would like kind of get off on a wayward path and like listen to every word and follow? It's like, it's a big movie star. It's like, again, imagine being with Tom Cruise. Well, if Tom Cruise says he wants to go break up a wedding, you're like, yeah, Tom Cruise, I'm totally going to follow you, as opposed to like Ben's supposed to be like, no, we need to go do this other mission. I need to help you. So I think having that kind of like time of when you would be starstruck really helped us buy into the narrative that like Ben would go kind of off mission and do this thing because of who Neil Russell is and his love for him, which I think really helps sell that kind of that era and that story for us.
Absolutely. One of the things, of course, about the episode that we mentioned earlier that I think plays so well are the sort of the parallel love stories that we have going on. And I honestly, I hesitate to even call them love stories because I think there's a different name for them, but I don't know exactly what to call them. And not only, of course, do you have Neil's and of course Ben and Addison, but we also get a wonderful scene between Ian and Rachel. We haven't seen Rachel for a while since the first season. What was it like to bring her back, and what was it like to explore, not only, of course, the relationship as it's advanced between Ian and Rachel and kind of been rekindled in the past 3 years, the missing 3 years, but also to bring in these larger sort of plot arc elements with the microchip and what could be going on with that. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot that going on in this episode. It's filled with a lot. So I'm curious as to like playing with that element and introducing that bit as well as bringing Rachel back. What was that like?
Yeah, I would say there's a pretty big, or at least launching pad for a B story here that as you go on for season 2, you'll see this is the kind of the beginning. But the interesting thing I remember when we talked about bringing Rachel back was I don't believe we had seen her character since like 113, I want to say. So there was this kind of like, and I think that was kind of left like you don't know if her and Ian are still together or what that was. So it's like, how do we, if we want to bring her back and say they're still dating, like how do you kind of fill in the gap of what's happened between those 10 plus episodes? And then, plot terms like what is the role she can fill and is going to fill going forward. So, but I also think it's nice to see, a relationship that, because the Addison Ben thing is such like it's literally like hologram, like they were in a relationship, but like literally can't touch, to see two people be in a relationship who are actually both physically there and like go home to each other every night and have a history and all that, just like weirdly feels like the most normal relationship in a sense. One of them is not a hologram. Now, of course, Addison and Tom, which we didn't have last season, so there is that now. But I think it was nice bringing her back. And like I said, not to get anything going forward, but we will be seeing more of them and kind of how that relationship is strained by, this ongoing chip issue that is being had. But I would say definitely like keep an eye on that story because it becomes important down the road.
Nice. Cool. Looking forward to that.
Thanks for the tease. I'm interested. Sam kind of touched on it, but I just want to delve a little bit further. So you've got, for want of a better word, love stories. You've got Neil and Ben both in stories where they've made decisions about their relationship, and that's very clear. And then you've also sort of got that with the Ian and Rachel plot as well, where he's made that decision to keep a secret from her. So you've got 3 different storylines, 2 of which very much front and center, and then the Ian and Rachel one. This sort of a what came first piece. If we weren't ready for the chip piece to come out, do you think that scene would have played out differently in a different episode? The fact that it was the right time to bring the chip scene out, was that what caused that to be kind of a third strand of that emotional plot line?
Honestly, until you asked me the question before, I didn't even, and this may sound silly of me as a writer, like, because I was just thinking like the Lonely Hearts Club, I always just thought of it as like Ben and Neil, but obviously Ian is probably a part of that club looking back. And so I think we were kind of chip story was kind of, we knew we needed to kind of get that going. Again, I can't remember exactly at what point Rachel came in, but I don't know that we were looking at that story as like, oh, we also have this other relationship that is kind of playing out. Tragically is not the word, but like, you know, a romantic relationship, but doesn't kind of like end in a happy way that you think of in the beginning. So I'm glad you guys kind of observed that, because I didn't even I didn't consider it's actually 3 love stories there in some sense. I guess I look at that as more of like this kind of launching off point for the chip. But you're absolutely right. It is a, you know, especially for Ian, their own love story, or reintroducing love story, and how is that going to be ongoing through the thing. So I admittedly maybe didn't see the connection until you just said that. So.
We fans are often known for seeing things that weren't intended to be there. And I'm just always interested to know if something was intentional or if it just happened that way and we noticed and appreciate it anyway, regardless of the background. So it's cool.
No, it's a great observation. Like I said, now I think the Lonely Hearts Club has suddenly gotten bigger, which is makes it even kind of more sad, happy. It's like I said, it's a happy episode, but there at the end, you're like, oh, if you look at those 3 relationships, you're like, oh man, oof, poor. That poor club. They all came out pretty
all trying to do the right thing.
Yeah,
all trying to do the right thing, all being somewhat toxic with it.
Yeah. You know, something else is, speaking of like the parallel storylines within the episode, I have, you know, since I've seen episode 4, and, you know, we got episodes 1, 2, and 3 as screeners, and then we got 4 and 5. So there was a bit of separation between when we saw 3 and when we saw 4. That said, immediately I could not help but see 4 as sort of this emotional sequel almost to episode 3, because you know, I gave Raymond Lee his well-deserved laurels on the last episode of Fate's Wide Wheel, because I just think his performance in that episode, and in particular some of the moments that he has with Addison, are just brilliant pieces of acting. Well, in this episode, not only do we get more brilliance obviously from Ray, but Caitlin has a couple of moments in particular that are just astounding. And specifically the moment where she's, you know, she says she almost jumped into the accelerator to go after him when they were shutting the project down. I mean, that scene is very powerful, and she obviously rises to the occasion. When you're working on something like that, especially knowing what came before in in episode 3, you know, what type of thought and care goes into crafting a scene like that in order to, you know, to kind of pay some of that stuff off while also moving these characters forward?
I mean, when I got this episode, and again, we kind of knew was going to be the episode in which Ben and Addison, you know, break up, for lack of a better term, even though they're technically already broken up by the happenstance of, you know, 3 years and Tom and all that. You know, I feel like the character arcs and those kind of things, you know, sometimes we map those out. Those are less movable than, you know, again, are we going to do a 50s action thing? Are we going to be in the 80s? You know, those kind of, we obviously we talk about inside, but sometimes it's like, well, what can pair along with those? Like, what's the best time period and host and story and environment to like accentuate the character arcs and stuff. And I think this one was a big one because, I mean, I have this actually funny story. I remember I was on the bus. I don't know what day we were shooting, but I was on there with Ray and Caitlin, and she just looked over at me and she's like, so you're just the new kid coming in here and breaking up the fan favorite relationship. And I was like, oh my God, that is exactly what I did. But I was like, and that kind of hit me of like this again, you know, say what you want about the episode in terms of like the whole, but like, I think you will look back at this one in terms of like their relationship. This is where it clearly like ended to an extent, and like how devastated I think some fans will be or maybe not, but like it was a lot of heavy stuff. And it was also a way for like, you know, Ben's character, you know, it's been, you know, he's had 3 leaps. This is his 4th leap. It's been a very short time for him. And how is he processing that? We saw some of that in 3 and how he, you know, was a little more reckless. And then for Caitlin, who's had 3 years, and it's like those scenes we knew where they just both laid everything out on the table. Like, hey, here's my side and here's what I'm going through and here's my side. And neither one of them are wrong, but neither one of them like are right, and it doesn't fix the situation they're in, but it is what it is. I think it was just nice for those characters to be able to lay out those cards and say, here's where we're at. What do we do from here? And then, of course, Ben makes his choice at the end about what he thinks needs to happen. So I think we take those scenes very seriously because, again, the other stuff's interchangeable. We could have put that in a thriller. We could have set that in the 80s, but that character stuff, you can't really move forward with your story arcs until you have those moments. So I think you have to take care of the characters. And here's what's great with working with the actors. They know the characters. They've spent more time with their characters than you have. As writers, we have to take care of everyone. We have, anywhere from, 6 to 10 characters on any given episode to juggle. They sometimes only think about their, what would Ben be going through? What would Addison be going through? So sometimes you just talk with them and they're like, well, the last episode I was going through this. And so sometimes they can help recenter you on oh yeah, because we're talking about episodes ahead of time. You're writing 4, but you're talking about 5 and 6. And so they can help recenter you this is where I think my character's head's at. And so it's really great to just check in with them of hey, given where you were last episode, where do you think you are? And sometimes you can make changes based on that, or they accentuate certain dialogue you've given them because they're well, I thought my character would say it this way because, they just have so many interesting takes, I guess, on it. I enjoyed checking in with them during those scenes just to make sure where their head's at and if they thought that their character, because it's surprising how much just tonally you change the way you say a word or you add a word, and sometimes in those big scenes, as you fans will read into it and it'll take on a whole new meaning. So it's sometimes they'll add stuff and you're wow, that was a really good ad. And so I think, and this is just my opinion about the episode, when I go back and watch those really big scenes, I still get teary-eyed, and I was I know what they're going to say, and I know where it's going, and I'm just the acting I thought in those scenes was fantastic. So
yeah, it's great writing and great performances. The two together and the direction. I mean, just everything about particularly that scene where Addison and Ben are talking. I find it really fascinating that your story about Caitlin and what she said, because what I've seen online over the last few weeks is fandom seems to accept that they're over. There's some theories that, okay, maybe they'll get back together, but basically fandom accepts that they're over. What seems to have divided fandom is half of us think, well, Ben is in the right. She should have waited forever. And the other half understand why she didn't. And I love the fact that this gives, after Ben's little rant in episode 3, you can probably see which side I'm on. After Ben's little rant in episode 3, Addison gets a good chance to really articulate her side. This isn't even a question. This is just an observation, and to see what's going to happen tomorrow after this goes out, what people are talking about online, because I do wonder if more people are going to say, I get Addison's point of view now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to happen, but...
Yeah, I admittedly stay out of the, while I'm on Twitter and all that, I stay out of the circles because I've seen, things happen on other shows with Twitter and writers. And so I wasn't quite aware of that. But I will say, in writing that scene in which you have to be in both of their heads, just imagining me in either one of those situations, neither one of them are great. I don't know that, flip a coin on any given day and do you want to be Addison? And this is something when I talked to Caitlin, I think we added in the dialogue because, from her point of view, when we wrote the dialogue, which is mostly there, I know we added because she was thinking about she's well, Ben left me in this life. We had a perfect life and he thought he needed to go jump into the accelerator to save me, but he left me here. And I was oh, we didn't necessarily write it that way originally, but she added that in. I was that would be hard when you think about again, and if you're in a relationship, pointing at you, you started this, you left me here, do you want to be, and again, in Ben's point of view, he's left in terms of like just leaping and leaping. So like they all have their own obviously arguments about like who is in the worst situation hurt the most. But I thought that was a unique perspective that she was able to provide for us from an actress's point of view of like, I was left here. I was left in this life, and it's not as great as, you know, everyone thinks it might be. So I hope when people watch that scene, they are, whether they're not empathetic towards Addison's character, but like can actually look at that and be like, oh, I wonder, would I rather be Ben or would I rather be Addison? Because I don't know that there's a clear answer. And I think hopefully that's how we intended it, is that you feel for both of them. And like the heartbreak of that is, I think, where the emotion comes from, hopefully. Because if there was a clear black and white, like you did this and you're wrong, it's like, okay, it's easy to side with that, you know?
Yeah, I think the pure like pathos of the moment that is evoked not only, you know, for Addison, but also for Ben. I think that's the key, is that you really, over the course of 2 episodes in particular, you really do see both sides. And with this episode specifically, I think by the end, you can't help but kind of come to terms with it in some ways, you know, as a viewer. And for me, like I never was on either side, you know, because I understood where Ben was coming from. I understood, you know, where Addison was coming from. So for me, it's just been really gratifying to see the journey that they've gone on up to this point. And it's going to be fascinating to see where it goes from here. One of the other things about this episode that stands out, I think, especially from the prior 3, is that we get to spend more time with Tom in this episode than any previous episode. What was it like to, you know, to write for that character? Because I personally, if I'm being completely honest, I think it's probably the most difficult character to write for on the show right now. I genuinely believe that. I think that there's just, that character to me has got to be difficult, because you don't want to do too much of this. You don't want to do too much of that. So I'm very curious what it's like to write for him. And then I have a follow-up to that, but well, let's go with that first.
Yeah. And, I believe he's introduced in 2. So, you know, this episode was kind of picking up, you know, an introduction of what we saw in 2. You know, we talked about Tom, and what's interesting, again, before they get cast, you know, we all had this kind of idea of who they are. We didn't necessarily have a prototype, but, you know, we kind of thought of him as like, here's what I think the tricky part is like, anytime, you know, we've seen these storylines where you introduce like the other man, the other person, the third wheel, like what love triangle, whatever, you know, I think fans will have their own preconceived notions of like, are they going to be evil or are they actually the one? And like, so just trying to tiptoe those lines, like we just want to make this like a character who is, you know, obviously there to do his job as good as what he does, cares for Addison. There was actually a scene that was cut out of my episode in which you actually saw they were like walking down the hall talking with like Jen and Magic and Ian, but like you got the sense that like they've known Tom for a while and he is their friend, which I don't know if you necessarily missed in the episode, but like the idea was like while he's new to people at Quantum Leap, he's not like new to the group necessarily, and like everyone loves him, and he doesn't put off a threatening air and is like has helped Quantum Leap get back on its feet, is like there to do a job. I think we're just always trying to like make sure we are not like pointing an arrow or like leaning towards like any of the like preconceived notions of like, is he good? Is he bad? Is he this? Is he that? We're just trying to play as like, he's a human who fits into the story and this is his purpose. And then of course, you know, when you cast someone, they bring their own kind of mannerisms and stuff to it, which sure people can read into, but you know, sometimes you get an actor and you're not necessarily like riding towards like those things. So you're like, I remember one time on set, like Peter was crossing his arms and I was like, does that make him look like he's being closed off and defensive? And I was like, and that wasn't written. It was just like, that is the actor's sometimes inclination to like cross their arms or make a certain face and do all that. So I think we, or at least when I was on set, I was always trying to be mindful of like, what someone could read into, and it not necessarily like we're not like throwing in a look there like, oh, again, is he gonna turn out to be this just because he made that one look? So I was trying to be conscious of that. But yeah, Tom, as far as a character to write for, I think what helped me is like he believes that Quantum Leap is this great program, which it is, and I won't say that was his number one because obviously Addison is there, but like just keep him on the road. Like he is there to help. He is everyone's friend and he is a nice guy. And that is truly who he is. And then however he's perceived from there, like we really can't control. But yeah,
Sure.
not necessarily the easiest character to write for, because you are like on a tightrope in a way that the other characters, you can kind of like allow them to be like a little more free because they aren't carrying those weight of expectations as like a new character who's come to the show, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny to me because you mentioned the love triangle thing, and obviously that has certainly been thrown around in the fandom. But for me, I don't see it as a love triangle at all. You know, I just see it as someone's moved on and someone has not, and there's a good reason why he hasn't. And you know, but the other thing, the follow up that I wanted to ask about Tom specifically is that something happens towards the end of the episode, which I feel is pretty revelatory, and not just in terms of the revival, but the classic series as well. And Tom gives this theory about the nature of quantum leap being sacrifice, that Sam, you know, made a sacrifice by going into the accelerator, that Ben made a sacrifice by going into the accelerator, and that it's a one-way ticket. Where did that come from? And obviously I know you can't give anything away, so I'm not going to ask where that leads, but I'm just so fascinated by the idea. I think it's lovely. I think it's heartbreaking. You know, it certainly plays into the finale of the classic series and Sam never returning home. So I'd love to know a little bit about where that came from. And, you know, was that one of those moments that sort of collaborated on, you know, that like Martin and Dean kind of give guidance there? Was that all you? Was that, you know, I'm just very curious about that particular aspect of the episode.
And can I throw in just a little extra to that? Just
Sure.
to maybe you can also include this in your answer. It also very specifically, that's quite a pivot from what we've seen so far in the new series. The classic series was very much about God or fate or time is leaping him. The new series has been technology. It's a machine that's leaping him. And suddenly we get this very spiritual, philosophical scene. So I'm also just interested in the fact that why now? Why this pivot?
Hopefully you're not disappointing with my answer. This would be a great time for Dean to be on here and answer, because I'll admit that is a scene that was not in the original break that we talked about. It is something that Dean added probably right around the first draft. And like I said, I don't know that we had any conversations in the room about anything. What I remember originally what that scene was supposed to be was just supposed to be a Tom and Magic, like, hey, we are two guys high up in this program who are carrying this bird of like time travel and saving the world. And like, what is that like when you're talking to like basically a peer in a way that like, not that everyone else is not on their level, but again, they're carrying this kind of like mission on their shoulders, and like what would they talk about? Again, I can't speak to, you know, the sacrifice in this where that came from Dean specifically. I've actually never asked him, but I think it does speak to Tom's character in terms of like, again, how much he respects the program, how much he's thought about it. You know, he mentions his dead wife, and like you wonder like how much has he thought about time travel and what has happened to Sam, what has happened to Ben, and what kind of meaning this program has and moving forward. So I wish I had like an answer that was like, this is exactly why I wrote that, but I don't know if you'll catch Dean on another one and you can come back. But I think that will have to come from him, because I honestly don't have an insight, and I have admittedly never asked. So, but I think I'm going to ask him now.
This is a time travel show. Is the dead wife going to have any relevance? You can't answer that, I know. So sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Feel like here's what I always feel about shows. You always have the liberty to plant seeds, and whether you decide to water them or not is always a great thing you have in your back pocket, because it's like sometimes you'll just write something and then you never pick it up again. But sometimes we'll come in on episodes. It's like, well, remember we mentioned that thing randomly in episode 2, and it's like, I wonder if we can water that seed and it grows into something. So you'll have to see if it's rained any on that one.
That was a very good answer.
That was a great answer. Was there anything else left? Because you mentioned earlier a cut scene. Was there anything else left kind of either on the cutting room floor or just not filmed at all that you were really like, oh, this is going to be great, and then it didn't
gosh. This was honestly the most fun on set I've ever had doing this scene, and it rained that day and it was cold, so that tells you it had to be extra fun. So, and I think I'm allowed to talk about this, but in the original script, there was a scene. So when Neil and Ben went to go steal his tuxedo, as currently edited, the police come and they're arrested, and that's how it ends. Originally, they take the tuxedo, and on their way out, they're in Universal City Walk, but there was a bunch of impersonators out there. I don't know that you can see them clearly in shot, but we had so many, I can't even remember. Like there was a Doc Brown one, there was a Marilyn Monroe one, like we had tons of them out there. But Neil he's taking photos with Fan, and someone just comes up and slaps the camera out of Ben's hand, and you look over and it is a Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonator who only talks in Arnold Schwarzenegger quotes. Which is like things like, he'll look at Neil and be like, who's your daddy and what does he do? And the guy was Arnold Schwarzenegger and Neil get into a literal fist fight.
Oh my gosh.
And that is actually how they ended up arrested. Now, we had to cut that for time because, we get 42 minutes and some odd seconds. But
sure.
And that was there from originally we were talking about like whatever actor we cast, like at the time it was Ted Danson. It's like, what if you run into an impersonator of yourself and they think you're better than you? But it's like, how do you realistically how can we realistically shoot that? So we were somewhere between, I think, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Rocky, and we literally put out a casting call, and there is only apparently one guy who does Arnold impersonations basically in the whole country. So we flew this guy out from Florida.
Wow.
And he was lovely. He was so good. I mean, he was like 6'5", 6'6", like had to be like pushing through him. Like he was like probably bigger than Arnold. I don't know. In a leather jacket, glasses. It was so great. We had so much like when the crew is like dying laughing when he's like doing these quotes and like getting in fights. So that is one. And again, you could cut it out. Obviously, it did not plot-wise change the story necessarily, but I wish we would have had an extra couple minutes that we could have got that in there, because I think just for like Hollywood fun, like a memorable scene, that my money would have been on that one, because I still think about like I said, I have access to those cuts, so I can always go back. But I really wish the audience could have seen that, and that's that tonal thing of like, is this absurd? And it's like maybe a little bit, but like to watch again, even on the day, like Tim Matheson arguing with this guy who looks just like Arnold, and then Ray's in the corner like trying to like get them to stop fighting just in real life. I was like, this is absurd, but it's so great. I was trying to think if there was anything else major we cut out. There were some scenes that were obviously longer than what you see. You're not missing anything necessarily, but I know that scene with Addison and Ian after she just has the big fight with Ben and they go in Magic's office. That scene was actually much longer. Just had to cut for time. So, if we were on streaming and we could have, 55 minutes per episode, we could see all these things. But, we were pretty beholden to that 42 minutes and change.
Yeah, I can only hope that one day, Peacock will do the thing they've done with The Office and, put those extended episodes on or something like that. Gosh. That would be awesome. Here's a quick question, actually, to kind of go off of that. Now, obviously, with the Arnold scene, it's a little different because you change the circumstances of their arrest. But, do you all ever look at some of these scripted moments that might not make it to the screen as still being considered kind of like a part of the story, just maybe unseen, and so that you can use that to inform something that you might write down the road? Or are you basically of the mind that if it didn't make the screen, it's not, it's not really a part of the story? And if we pivot away from something that we might have written, 3 or 4 episodes back that didn't make it to the screen, that's okay?
I don't know that we ever. And again, other writers who've been on the show longer may have different experiences. For the episodes I've been there for, I can't think of any that we've cut something, at least to my knowledge, that we would want to retread. But I know sometimes when something gets cut, we try to think about like, why was that cut, and maybe we don't do that again. Or there was something about it that if it wasn't for time, like was it a tonal thing? sometimes like point of views, like if you have a character like lurking around the corner following Ben and those get cuts, it's like, well, is that a network studio thing? Is that we don't want to show that? So I don't think we ever go back to them thinking we can like, not unless it was planted somewhere else and we just didn't get to see the actual scene. But I can't think of any, but we do take those lessons of what's cut and try to, again, question, why was it cut? Should we not do that again? Just a lot. There's the weird thing about like, I guess, making a TV show, there's a lot of different like, hands in the mix kind of thing. You have a lot of people to answer to and a lot of people who, believe this is what the show is, or this is what we should have, and notes and stuff and that. And so you're always kind of like trying to, appease people some. So sometimes stuff just gets like cut for like, again, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's a studio network thing, sometimes it's we don't need that. So you're always kind of just like staying on your toes, ready to like move any direction and make it work. But
Well, all right. I do have one other thing that I wanted to ask about, just kind of what's coming up without any spoilers, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But can you talk about some of the things that you might be looking forward to the most, or if there's any, episodes that you've had the chance to work on or see already that we haven't, obviously, that you're really excited for, for the fans to witness?
I don't think this is a spoiler, but the Hannah character, I think, well, I don't want to speak for all the writers, but I feel like we're very excited about that character's role in the season. And not only that, I was a huge Liza Taylor playing that. Was really just cool that we got her. So I'm just excited to see or for everyone to see kind of like, again, not only the purpose, but just the acting from Eliza. I think she's great. And I can't say what the episode's probably about, but there are some time periods we go back to that I don't know that people thought we would have went back that far.
Sure.
Say that. And places and the particular place we will go that I don't know that was in people's, when you just think of Quantum Leap, I don't know if that would be on your list of 15 places we would go probably. So I think we were doing some really cool stuff, not only this season, but coming up in this first 8, which I know will air, I think, pretty subsequently. But I think we're all just very excited about what we've been able to do this season and make the show, I always think it just looks great. We always do the best with our budget and cast and all those things. So I think we're all really proud of how it's turned out. So I think we're just excited for what the fans think of this new season in general. But yeah, I think those are two things that I'm we'll be watching Twitter during a couple of those episodes just to see what people think right out of the gate of oh, we're there and we're in this time. Whoa, it's cool. So
I think for the first 8, thanks to the trailer that aired at the end of episode 1, I think we know the time periods and locations for all
That's
of them.
fair.
So I've got a suspicion I know the two things you're alluding to there.
I forgot the trailer does, and we have had conversations about the trailers and how much they technically spoil, but we get it. You gotta tease a little bit.
I heard a little bit of that myself. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I love Hannah, and I cannot wait to see what's next. I think Eliza is superb, and that was definitely, I think episode 3. I really enjoyed her in the episode and what she brought to that, especially considering where Ben was, on his journey.
So just to clarify, then, obviously. The first 8 episodes produced. We've had the strikes over the summer. Am I right in thinking that the team are currently breaking the next 5 episodes? And is that the current plan? I know obviously we've got the SAG strike going on, but are you looking further ahead than the next 5, or is this very much a block in your mind at the moment of a continuing story up to 13?
I think right now we're writing for what we know, and that is that we have 5 more episodes. I don't know for a lot. I feel like I listened to Sam, one of your previous episodes, and there was mention of other episodes. That's always I feel like in any show, there's always a conversation of whether they'll give you more. We don't know that. but it's always like this like cloud looming over. But what we do know is we have 5 more episodes to round out the 13, and that is our focus. So I think I can say we're currently breaking 11. You know, what's weird is we broke most of them previously, but with the strike, we've went back and changed a couple. So we've had to kind of do some re-breaking. But we were supposed to resume shooting next month, but with the SAG strike, obviously, if you don't have actors, you are shooting nothing. Yeah. We've made jokes about the writers being actors, which none of us, background, I can't speak for the other writers. Could only be like background and like a dead body with a sheet over them is about as good as I am. But until that is resolved, we technically won't be shooting everything, but we're going to try to obviously get our stories together. So in the event that the strike is lifted, we will be able to roll into shooting those next 5. But I think, I was trying to think if there's anything else I can say for them. It's weird. They're obviously of the piece of the 13, but they're also different because we've had I think it's very rare that you get to write and shoot the first 8 and watch them and then kind of look at the last 5. Because usually you're just doing it all of a piece, and it's kind of like you don't get feedback until you're already done shooting all of them. By the time you've heard anything, it's like, well, too late. We can't go back and do anything. But we kind of had this lull that we've been able to get feedback from, the powers that be. And also now fans are starting to watch the first couple episodes, and we're still writing. So I think that kind of is in the back of our mind, how we round out this last few episodes. So I think that's a unique case that you don't typically get unless there's a strike. So
unfortunately, you got to make the good out of the bad sometimes. So, Sure.
Yeah.
But I really loved Lonely Hearts Club. I just think the kind of the 1-2 punch really of 3 and 4 is fantastic and speaks well to the way that the season is going thus far, just because there's so many high points already. And I love the fact that we're getting these wonderful emotional stories about our characters. And even when you look at the stuff that's happening at the project, we're seeing more, wonderful character moments between human beings as opposed to a lot of, exposition, which I know is necessary sometimes, but obviously, going a little bit away from that procedural, we have to find this document and do this and leaning more into who these people are, what they care about, and why we should care about them, I think has been incredibly successful, and I've really enjoyed it a great deal. And I think Lonely Hearts Club succeeds at doing all of that very, very, very well. So, thank you so much for joining us today, Kristy. Yeah. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And I had one more, which I was like, I'm going to ask you guys a question. I won't put you on the spot, but I was just saying one of the other small, and I didn't realize it until I was talking to the writers' assistants, because they're like, they do the Twitter, and it's like, give us some fun facts for your episode. And as I was rewatching it recently, I had forgotten about all the movies and TV shows within this TV show that I had to come up with, which was sometimes really fun, but sometimes even just titles we have to clear. But I was very delighted at some of the ones that you made it in, and they're not really, I guess Easter eggs is not the word, but if someone were to go through and track those, they're fun little, you can kind of write a list of all the movies that Neil and stuff was in. But I feel like my favorite was coming up with the sitcom Awful Good Together, which just feels like a very 70s, 80s sitcom. And then we got to name the memoir Awful Good, which I felt was very within Neil's personality. But there's just a lot of fun if you listen to those, Coming Full Circus and Duplicity. You're
yes,
these sound like terrible movies, which is what is funny about them. So hopefully someone on Twitter will make a little running list of that, and I can check it out.
I'm sure. Matt will definitely have it in his book.
Yes. Matt has already done this. That list exists, and it felt like his movies were for some reason it reminded me of Jean-Claude Van Damme's career. I don't know what it was. It's just had that kind of cheese factor.
Yeah, that was me just sometimes sitting at my desk just laughing, just having my own little laugh as if this is so silly, but also so delightful that I get to think of these. But it got very meta there for a while, and I'm like,
I want to see all those.
Right.
But there is a list already in the next edition of my book, so thank you for giving me something to write about.
One of those, I just stole a title, and it doesn't mention a plot, but one of them was an old feature spec I wrote. It was like the second feature spec I ever wrote. And I just like took the title. I was like, well, this is clearly never going to ever get made. So I'll just get the title made in a different TV show.
Nice.
So,
Which one was that?
Oh, it was when they are walking up to the wedding and they're talking about, Ben's talking about his badge, and he's like, I learned that from Neil's movie Public Safety, and it's the flu weekend. It's literally just the title, Public Safety. I just threw it in there. I was like, I'm going to throw in one of my old and see if it clears. It ended up clearing. I was like, really? There's not a movie named Public Safety? It seems like there would be like, you know, like, I don't know, a security guard. I don't know. But yeah, sometimes you just throw stuff in there and you're like, this probably won't make it. And then you're like, oh no, it made it. But so I get to I'll have some fun with my family when they're watching it. I'll get to throw them some like, this is what this is from. So
Cool.
I love that texture. It definitely adds a lot, and it makes that world feel even more real. And to hear some of that resume, I know that Awful Good Together in my mind was very Moonlighting-esque. Like that's kind of where my brain went with it. So
yeah, luckily I never had to come up with what is that show about? Because sometimes, again, like I think I did the duplicity thing. It's like I was like sometimes you just think of that on the spot, but then you're like, oh, but you want to sound like it could actually be a movie. Like it can't be so silly, but it's like, but again, in the world of like 80, like if this would have been 70s, 80s, like times, like it also has to be just like tonally, just like a little absurd that anyone made that movie.
Right.
Like, or they wouldn't make that movie today, obviously.
I mean, they made Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So really anything is fair game.
Right, yeah. But you wouldn't make that movie now. So it's like you're thinking of a time, you're in the 2000s, but you're actually writing a fake movie that would have existed in like, 10, 15 years prior to that. So I got very again, I probably spent too much time on it, but those are little things as a writer.
Never.
You get to enjoy, and like no one will know the amount of time you spend on it, but and it makes you happy. So
yeah.
Yeah, it makes us happy seeing those kind of little bits that, as Sam says, well built. So, Kristy, thank you so much for your time. We've had an absolute ball talking to you, and it's been so delightful hearing your recollections about writing an episode that I know both podcasts loved, and I'm sure fandom will take to their hearts as well. Best of luck with the upcoming episodes, and congratulations on joining the Quantum Leap family.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, and I love doing these kinds of things. I haven't done one of them in a while, but I just love that when there are fans, not only just fans in general of a show I'm on, but like the fact that you guys do a podcast weekly to just talk about how much you love the show, I think means a lot to us as writers, because we feel, again, to have people watch it so closely and want to talk about it and engage in work that you've done is like extra meaningful on top of the fact that we all love writing the show. And so thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kristy.
Thank you.
And we're back. Wow, that was an interview. I mean, we crossed the streams, Sam and Matt, Fate's Wide Wheel, the Quantum Leap podcast, a writer. What more could you want during an actor strike than to get everybody but the actors on the Quantum Leap podcast and Fate's Wide Wheel? So, make sure you subscribe to both Fate's Wide Wheel and Quantum Leap podcast, because there's interviews coming out on both sides. So I thought that was a great interview. It was amazing.
Yep, I'm very, very impressed. Who'd have thought that all my stalking skills would come in handy down the track?
That was funny. Speaking of writing, this episode has so many good moments that I want to talk about, and interesting moments that were just in there. I'm sure you guys saw different ones too. Let's see. I'll just start mentioning stuff and we can talk about it. I think it was Addison that mentioned that the fans of Neil Russell were of a certain age. And that was like to me, it was a little Easter egg on Scott Bakula's series, Men of a Certain Age. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Not only that, but also just the fans of the original series too. If they watched it when it was on the air, they're of a certain age now too.
Are you saying I'm old?
Yes.
I thought it was looking pretty good with this new camera I got last week, but then the day after I went to a thrift store and they automatically gave me the senior discount. So I guess I'm not doing as good as I thought I was. So I'm not a senior. Did you guys notice any other little moments that you liked or things about the episode?
Well, I like Tim Matheson. That was a great one. I mean, he's he's not the only Animal House alumni to have appeared on Quantum Leap. So that was a good callback.
That was a good get. Tim Matheson.
I love the character because there were so many Hollywood types like that who appeared on the Tonight Show back in the day with Leno and with Johnny Carson. So it was a good moment.
Yeah. You know, something did come out at me that made me laugh. Somehow, I don't know how, but somehow when we're doing these Quantum Leap podcasts, somehow the conversation always ends up about Power Rangers. And I've got another one. I don't know how, I don't know why, but they just somehow always seem to mesh. But anyway, how Ben convinced the cop to let them off with a warning by saying, "Oh, you do know that Neil here was the voice of, you know, the ringmaster in the circus in that animated movie. You know, I'm sure he can, you know, entertain your kids at their birthdays and stuff like that." And it immediately reminded me of this story that I heard. Someone had posted a video from one of the Power Rangers conventions, and it was the villains panel. And there was the guy that played that did the voice of Goldar, who was the golden monkey in the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And he said he got pulled over by a cop for speeding once. And just this day, he'd done some promotional work for the show, and he had a bunch of signed photographs of Goldar that he'd signed in the car. And he says to the cop, "Do you happen to have kids?" And the guy says, "Yeah, I've got a couple." And he says, "I'm Goldar." And the cop's like looking at him like, and so he managed to get out of the speeding ticket by giving them the signed photographs and everything. So yeah, reminded me of that funny story anyway. Yeah,
really believable. Yeah, I liked their little romp around town. You know, it was a very rompy kind of day. Ben and Neil were just running around town doing crazy stuff. And one of the things was they went to the wax museum and it was crazy in there. There was Jason. I saw Brittany. I saw Pamela Anderson from Baywatch. There was some kind of Santa Claus. I don't know if it was like some kind of horror movie Santa Claus. Did you notice anybody else made in wax?
Well, I noticed that it was in Universal City there at outside the studio attraction, and I love that he kept wearing the Planet Hollywood cap. I thought that was classic too.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I loved the backlots in this. They were in the whole Star Trek Voyager Fairhaven / The Good Place sets.
Yes,
I love seeing those. Like I knew immediately when I saw the train station. I was like, "Oh, that's where they are. They're in Fairhaven." So I was pretty excited about that.
Oh, the Good Place though. That's right there. I love that. I did love the opening. I thought that was great. The whole the seriousness of it, and you really right off the bat it set the tone that this was going to be, you know, something
a bit
totally
more
unexpected,
lighthearted.
and then to go 90 degrees, totally the opposite was a great opening tag.
Something did piss me off towards the start of the episode, though. I hate it when Ben loses track of someone and then they've got to go search for them. For crying out loud, we've had the solution to this since the first season of the original series. For crying out loud, Addison, whoever the hologram is, get Ziggy to center you in on the person. Save the time, you know, get into the real story. I don't know if anything was gained by having them, you know, search for Neil while he was missing. I suppose only, you know, realizing that the letters had something to do with it, but they could have figured that out another way. And
we did kind of see it again, a throwback in the last episode where Ian stepped out of the middle of the table. I mean, you know, how many times did Al materialize in the middle of something like a display case and have to walk out of it?
Yeah, there's no Center Me On in this new series, is there? I never even thought of that until you just mentioned it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you'd think by now that, you know, with all the advances in the quantum leap technology that they've got, I mean, they've got much, much more access to people. They should be able to center in on people and stay locked onto them by now. So,
It could be as simple as things that made it too difficult to create situations that they had to solve. Like in modern day movies, a cell phone will solve 98% of all problems. So they have to figure out in the first part of the movie how to not have working cell phones. So they might have just said, you know what, these things like center me on someone. It makes it too difficult to be in a difficult situation. So we just have to kind of ignore that. So I'm all for that.
I disagree with that, Albie. I have to disagree with you there.
Okay.
It worked perfectly fine in the original series, and they had mobile phones in the original series too. I mean, there's no situation that that couldn't have been solved with a center me on in this season or in season 1 that would have resulted in, being written into a corner, because they got away with it so well in the original series.
But I think there are times when, like, for example, the whole idea of Ben being in the car, if Addison isn't centered on him, how does she stay with him in the car? It's like, again, it's almost like on one hand, the writers don't write it as a point, or they don't even consider it. It's just they put the 3 characters in the car and there they go. It's like, otherwise, if they're tracking Ben, they know where he is, and she's staying there.
Yeah, and I mean, we have confirmation now too that the project monitors the leaps. We didn't have confirmation of that in the original series, although it was sometimes implied. But in the earliest incarnation, like in Star Crossed, like they couldn't even see Sam in the imaging chamber when they were with Al. And, we did see that evolve and progress. We saw Dr. Beeks go in there later. We saw Katie McBain and be able to,
but only when they were touching Al. Only when they were touching Al.
Yeah, but that's the thing. We've seen this progression. Now it's to the point that that just about anyone can lock onto them in the imaging chamber, and also you can still monitor the entire leap remotely. If they can do that, there's no reason why they can't center in on someone. That just seems like it just seems like laziness that they have completely, skipped over that aspect of things, when it should really be the first thing you would think of when they've got all these advancements now.
Another thing I saw in the background when they were at the studio in the opening, that is a classic bit, which we always see, is the characters, the Roman soldiers walking in the background. It's like every time you show a movie studio set, there's Roman soldiers, or they're in the background. It's like
it's just a costume everyone has lying around, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
wasn't that a whole movie with George Clooney? Another the Romans. I forget what it was called.
What have the Romans ever done for us?
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's where they go to the Universal costuming department and just, what do we got? And it would have been cool to see like Jay and Silent Bob in there, like in that one Scream movie, just leaning against the building or something. That would have been cool. I watched this episode originally with Serenity. And she's like me. She talks to the screen like when there's stuff obvious, because they're there to make sure that this guy doesn't go on the boat and die and stuff like that. And he's like, I'm gonna go get some coffee, and Ben's just like, okay, that's great. And Rennie was like, you're not supposed to lose him. Why did you let him go? Like, even before.
Had he been told about it by that stage?
I don't know.
I don't think
I don't know. And later on in the episode, when he finally reunites with his daughter, and he's in the car and having that like monologue about like not having anything in life and not being kind of like all alone and a failure for not having a relationship with his daughter, and he's like, "What am I supposed to do? Just go up to her and apologize?" Serenity said, "Yes." So luckily he finally did. That was good.
I thought that the ending wasn't all that great, to be honest. It just
you didn't like that?
No, well, look, it wasn't bad per se, but I just thought they wrapped it up too quickly. It felt like they had all this build up towards the Neil trying to woo his ex again, and then that fails, and then immediately they say, all right, now focus on the focus on the daughter, and that's solved within, the first few seconds that they actually do focus on it. I thought, there was no build up to that side of things, and it was resolved far too quickly as well. So that's an issue that I had.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you because I really enjoyed that part, because they had set it up earlier in the episode. I think talking about when Tom was reading in between the lines of Awfully Good or Awful Good. Which one was it? Something like that, the book about the daughter and figuring it out. And, it resolved itself, and it wasn't like an immediate resolution at the end, because yes, that was the start of a restarted relationship or a started relationship between him and his daughter. But of course it would take time for them to, be on the same page again and have a relationship, a father-daughter relationship. But that was the start of it. And I think that happened because Ben finally understood he was doing the wrong thing for the wrong reason, trying to get Neil Russell and Laura back together. So,
but if that's the case, why would you spend so much time on the Neil and Laura relationship that's not going to lead anywhere? You didn't need to go you didn't need to spend that long on it if that's not going to go anywhere, and then spend virtually no time on that was the point of the episode side of things, which was going to be the point of the episode. That's what the point of the episode was.
Ben was going down the wrong path. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So he was going down the wrong path.
It's still not very good story structure, even if there is amazing behind it.
And actually, it leads into a larger point for me, and it's kind of getting to, I hate to say this, but the split personality of this new show is beginning to show more than it probably needs to. And that is what's going on in the Leap itself and what's going on back at the project. I think part of the success of the previous show was that, yes, there were things that were going on at the project, but they were not mentioned as much. And we were able to see more of a Leap develop. I mean, we were able to see more of the characters. A Single Drop of Rain is a good example. There's, again, where you basically have a group of characters who have grown apart from each other, and they have to go through what they go through to actually find out that they need to come back together. And we needed all the time that we saw on that story to make that happen. Whereas if you had to interject what was going on at the project with it, it wouldn't have had the impact. It wouldn't have had the storytelling involved in it. And I think that's a weakness that this current show has, is that because of the split personality between what's going on at the project versus what's going on in the Leap, we probably need to concentrate more on, maybe we should have an episode which is nothing but back at the project, or maybe we should have more episodes where what's going on at the project is less of the focus than what's going on in the Leap. Because right now, I hate to put it this way, boys and girls, but there's less and less to like about why Ben is leaping and why he is as a character. Because we just have all this intrigue about what's going on between him, between Addison, between what's going on with different people at the project. And I think we're losing sight of the strength of the show, which is putting right what once went wrong.
I hate to be a contrarian, but I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, Roger. I think they finally found their meshing, their gelling of the project headquarters and the Leap, and I feel like they're on the same page, because even when we are back at headquarters, they're focused on the Leap and helping the Leap. It's not like a separate storyline that much. So for me, I don't know if
when I was starting out in season 1 as well.
Yeah, for me, I don't know if the show's changing or I'm just getting used to it more, but I'm really liking the synergy that I'm seeing between the two things, between the two parts.
I think it's okay as long as, like you said, Albie, what they're doing at the project has some sort of a bearing on what's going on the Leap. If we're seeing it as a backup for the Leap, then I think that's okay. But I do understand what you're saying as well, Roger, and I think that this episode needed more time to breathe as well. And you know what? If they centered on Neil right at the very start, they would have had an extra couple of minutes to do some of those things that you were saying. So, I thought it was interesting that, because I actually interpreted it wrong the first time that I saw the episode. I thought that Neil died before he was able to get his manuscript out. But I was obviously wrong because they had the copies of the book, in the future at the project. But I did like the distinction that Magic was making. No, you have to read this. You have to read between the lines because an AI can't do that. So I do like the fact that they are realizing, that humans have a point of view that, computers just can't understand. And
well, I don't know that
humans
I
are
agree.
valuable, and that
I don't know
we
that I
need
agree
human
with
input.
that. I
No?
mean, in the leap home, or where basically where Sam leaps back and
Yeah, the leap back.
the leap back, where he basically, the whole thing where he says to Ziggy, read Shakespeare, and she says, the whole thing, in that instant she understands the whole thing about love. It's like, yeah, that's reading between the lines, because in Shakespeare you can't just take the literal words, you have to take how the characters mean the words.
That is true, but also, do we have confirmation that the version of Ziggy we're looking at now in the 2026 project is the same Ziggy as what we had originally, with the same ego built in? Because I actually think it's that ego which gives Ziggy the more humanoid sort of side that does make Ziggy unable to understand the nuances that you would read between the lines. I don't know if this version of Ziggy actually has that.
Not in canon, but I believe that Deborah believes that Ziggy is still Ziggy.
Okay.
So that has a lot to say about it. But we haven't had that come up in canon yet.
Yeah. Even so, even if a computer can read between the lines, there's no guarantee they're going to find everything. So, multiple perspectives are still good there. So I thought that was actually very good. And but something that did jump out at me that was interesting was when Addison said, if you can get Neil onto the Tonight Show, his book's going to be a massive hit, and he's going to end up, getting back into acting and have a lot more money and live very comfortably. And I'm like, so yeah, Ziggy's very good at making projections, I guess, because the way I see it, you don't really know what the changes are going to be until something actually changes it. So, I mean, yeah, you could make a prediction. This was an issue I had with the leap home as well. When Al was saying, if they'd won this game, people would be going on to the NBA and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, you don't know that. You don't know what's going to happen until something changes it. You can definitely make a prediction.
Right.
In my head canon, I think it's like that episode of Star Trek Voyager, Think Tank, where they're making all these calculations and predictions of what will happen if something happens, and how one little butterfly flapping its wings halfway across the world will change everything. So I think it's more like just really good educated guessing, but with the quantum computers and the multi-state of everything, who knows, hand wavy stuff. But that brings up a good point. I want to talk about the couple moments between Ben and Addison. I want to go back to Ben and Addison because for me, this episode and this season so far is about the relationship between Ben and Addison, and as it's falling apart and stuff. I like the moment after Ben changed history and Addison said, "We have 7 more Neil Russell movies to watch," and Ben said, "We." Yeah. And for half a second, I thought that whatever they did changed the relationship for some reason, and they were a we again. But then I realized that, they were just falling back in that old relationship that they had, and they had both forgotten that they were fighting almost, and that, they were living in the past timeline and how they used to really love and enjoy each other. And I was happy for that, but then I was sad. We is a hard word. We is a beautiful word when it's loving. We is a horrible word when you're not part of the we,
Something else jumped out at me there too. Something else that I'm noticing is they are not just literally making references to the original show, but they also seem to be following very similar sorts of themes and trends that a lot of the episodes did. This one felt very much like the end of Goodbye Norma Jean, where Sam leapt there to make sure that Marilyn made the Misfits, whereas in this case you could say that Ben leapt here to make sure that Neil did his 7 other movies.
Yeah. I don't know. I just I love that maybe in their timeline. Why wouldn't in their timeline would that change? You might know this, Roger. Why wouldn't they have already seen those 7 movies in the past?
Yeah, that's a good point. They would have. That's one of the things that maybe that should have been different. Maybe that should have been something that Addison should have said. And there were, because of how things changed, there were 7 more movies that we got to watch. Not that we can watch, but we got to watch, because again, that gets back to the whole idea of, if he changed the timeline and there's now a different reality where he made those 7 movies, if they used to watch all the Neil Russell movies, they would have seen them. Because it was, again, the leap took place in 2000. And so that would have happened. They would have seen those movies.
Well, you've also got to remember that the Quantum Leap project is in the quantum bubble. They've actually specified this now, where the quantum bubble's kind of exempted from the changes in the timeline, just so that things can be kept track of, and so that if
did
there
they?
is
Did
some,
they specifically say that?
They did say that in. I wish I could remember the episode, but it was in season 1. They actually did explain this, so that would be our reason for it. It's because of the quantum bubble.
I want to say it was Let Them Play, maybe, or thereabouts. So yeah,
I can't quite remember, but I do remember. It was the one where they were on the military boat, because remember Ben was helping Addison's dad, and they were they were wondering if anything that changed Addison's life is going to affect Addison, and they were saying it shouldn't because she's in the quantum bubble.
Hey, we're our own little think tank here, maybe a little bit. We don't even need George Costanza. So
apparently I'm not the only Nostradamus in the room.
Oh yeah.
Albie wants in on the action. He's a Nostradamus man too. So,
well, yeah. Let me say I hope this isn't true, just because I don't want to spoil it for everybody. But I had a crazy theory, like, what if? Because I'm even while I'm washing dishes and doing housework or something, I'm thinking about theories about Quantum Leap, because that's part of the reason I enjoy it. And one of the things I thought of is I'm trying to figure out Hannah. So and I had what I do is I don't listen to any other podcast or shows until after that episode's after show is out, because I don't want to be influenced by other people's opinions for our show. But I did listen to the Quantum Leap podcast after I put the after show out, and I heard Matt Dale talk about Hannah might be some sort of the time traveler's wife situation, where he's that would explain why Hannah's in multiple episodes, and Ben is forming a friendship or relationship with this person. So then, my mind's going, with this episode, Addison said, when they were having one of their arguments before, Ben said, I can't have you be my hologram anymore, which I loved, by the way. He needs his space. Give the man his space. Addison said, you know what I did? I tried to jump in the accelerator and leap, to find you, or I'm hoping it would bring me to you. What if she did? And what if Hannah is actually Addison? And with Ben and Hannah falling in love over a different bunch of leaps, at the end of that, we find out that Hannah is actually Addison, and it's kind of like that Pina Colada song where they're trying to find new love, but it turns out that they love each other still.
It'd be interesting. Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know where they're going with it.
Wouldn't Ben see any other leapers as themselves?
Did they touch?
No.
Mm.
They just established in this new incarnation that they just see other leapers as they are.
So I'm wrong.
Well, maybe. Or maybe it's some future version where, they need to stay disguised. I don't know. Or maybe she had plastic surgery.
Do you have any theories on who Hannah is? I've seen things online like it's Addison's mother, it's another leaper, it's another time traveler, it's all kinds of things. Who's Hannah?
Well,
I don't have anything to add. I'm just like everybody else. I'm waiting to see how it plays out.
Yeah. I don't really know. But you got to remember too, she's from the 1940s. So I would find it very hard to believe she'd have anything to do with the current project, not, being 80 years later, essentially, or close to it. Maybe something to do with the original project, maybe some way to link the original project to this one. That's about the only thing that I can come up with so far. Or it could just be, I think John Peel talked a bit about this. He's the author of Independence, when he was writing Independence, and the fact that Sam had the hots for his however many times great-grandmother, but it's because they were essentially soulmates. She was Donna's past life, and obviously Sam leapt into his past life, and that's why they were so attracted to each other in, way back then. It could just be that Hannah... He's connecting with the person's soul whenever he leaps into a situation where a different version of Hannah just happens to be there.
I like that.
I'd also like to think that maybe, as was pointed out earlier, that maybe there's some kind of a connection between the original Project Quantum Leap and the new project. And one of the things that maybe we might see is video diaries or some kind of log, some kind of information passed along that all of a sudden is discovered, which changes the focus of what Quantum Leap is about or how it's perceived by different groups, whether it be people at the military or people at the project themselves. It's when you think about it, the number of people that are involved with the current project and the number of people that were involved with the original project that we never saw, somebody could have been blogging, just basically writing down random thoughts about, hey, today we worked on this, but we decided that it wasn't the way to go at that point. And maybe it's something that could be a helpful hint down the road. She could be a teacher of somebody who's there at the project. She could have been somebody in their past.
Yeah. And maybe with her education and her contributions to the field of science, maybe the original project ended up with something that helped them to evolve the technology and to evolve how quantum leaping works, and by extension, the current project as well. So, yeah.
As they say, I have one word: flashbacks.
Good point, Hayden, because she is interested in quantum physics and all that kind of stuff, and so yeah, that's a good idea. The only other thought I had was again, what if she's a different leaper and she has a different agenda? Because the whole burning of that letter, if that letter is meant to fix something and she burns it so that never gets fixed, could be for a nefarious reason. Of course, we don't know because we haven't seen that episode yet. So I don't know. It's interesting that because the media was told about Tom and Hannah a long time ago, but we were asked not to say anything. But then, of course, they release all these previews that just are like Tom and Hannah, the Tom and Hannah show, the Tom and Hannah show that spoil everything. So it's like, what do you do? What do you talk about it? But I honestly don't know any more than I've talked about on this because I haven't seen her in another episode yet. So
as long as we don't have a reference to a husband and wife team winning the Nobel Prize from Pasadena, I'm fine with whatever comes.
So any final thoughts on the episode, Roger?
Yeah, final thoughts and your 1 out of 5 rating, Roger, please.
I'm going to give it a solid 3 Neil Russell People's Choice Awards. I think that it definitely put the drama there, which I'm all in favor of more drama. The fact that it was Ben and Addison this time as the real focus, the parallels to everything they were going through. I think that again, the fact that for Addison it's been all those years, whereas for Ben it's been days. It's a hard thing to put in perspective, and I think that as time goes along, hopefully that will be something that will be. It's never going to reach a resolution, but I hope that it can be somewhat brought closer to one.
And even though I know that this episode's not as good as the previous one that we just saw, I still quite enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing, Ben and Addison go through their proper breakup, I suppose you could say, is what it is. I want to see how Ben reacts to this and how Addison does as well. I think that there's some interesting things going on at the project too, and I'm keen to see where that thread that I was starting to pull, how it all unravels. I'm going to give this one, I was going to give it 3, but because of my accuracy, I'm going to bump it up 1. I'm going to give it 4 massively powerful quantum computing chips that hack into the computers out of 5.
All right. I really liked this episode, and there were some things that I didn't like about it, but I think it was very well written and very well constructed. I think I've watched the episode 4 times now, and each time I watch it, I notice more and more things in the script that are like setups and payoffs and things that work together, and I really just enjoyed the whole structure of it. So, and I enjoyed the story. It was a fun little story. It was sad, but some stories are sad, and I mean, if everybody was happy, Ben wouldn't be there to fix something. So, it was good. I'm going to give it a 5 real dolls that are supposed to be a wax figure of Tim Matheson as a young man in a tuxedo. Man, that's a long way to go. But I'm going to give it 5 out of 5. I really like this episode. I think I'm going to watch it one more time after we get off here because of the things you guys said. It'll give me a new perspective on it. But I really enjoyed it. So I'm going to give it 5 out of 5.
You should have gone 5 Neil Russell name tags out of 5. You need it.
It's the only thing I didn't write in my notes. So I don't, because I did. Yeah.
Pathetic. You need notes.
I do. I got flashcards. I got cue cards. I got notes. I got a teleprompter. I got all these things. So I'm doing my best here. But okay, now let's talk about next week.
What have we got next week?
Next week we're talking about One Night in Koreatown. In the description we have, it's Ben lands in the body of an 18-year-old working for his father's shoe store in Los Angeles' Koreatown at the start of explosive 1992 riots. Facing an emotional connection in the riots to his past, Magic joins Ben on the leap. Ooh.
That's cool.
So now that makes sense because
maybe there's a connection to Ben's own life as well, because Ben is Korean American, and maybe he lived in that area, and maybe he was somehow he lived through those riots. We don't know. You
never know. We saw in the season preview of Ernie Hudson being the hologram, Magic being the hologram for Ben in this episode. So it makes sense because Addison was dumped, I guess, as a hologram by Ben after he was dumped, given up for dead, and buried alive by his fiance. Oh, anyway, I'm not bitter, but
you should put that as the lead into this episode, and everyone will think it's like a true crime podcast.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, as far as I know, burying someone alive is against the law. I'm not saying that this is the best episode. Next week's episode, season One Night in Koreatown, season 2, episode 5, but it's this season's best episode. So I'm really looking forward to talking about that one. It's an amazing episode. That's all I can really say about it. So for the Quantum Leap podcast, Quantum Leap After Show, I'm Albie.
And I'm Roger Colton.
And I've been Hayden, and you cannot out-meme us.
We'll see you next time.
Roger.
Hello, Mom. Thank you, Mom, for giving me my friend.